Chapter 657. Boy, do you want to die? What do you want to do? Nongju transmitted her voice anxiously. Everyone else was also looking at Yu Qianqiu with the same thoughts in their minds. Yu Qianqiu ignored him. In his previous life, he had made a name for himself among all sorts of people. Even though he was a hoodlum and his nature was hard to change, the aura of a superior was not something that could be faked. Lu Mei was also a man who acted according to the situation. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that this person's aura was not ordinary. Seeing him approaching step by step, he felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. He wanted to step back subconsciously, but he forced himself to hold back. He said in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" 2 meters away from him, Yu Qianqiu stopped. If he went forward, he would force Lu Mei to do something desperate, and then he would be exposed. As long as he kept a safe distance from Lu Mei, everything would be fine. "Do you really want to know where Yu Qianqiu and Nanhai Nongju are?" Yu Qianqiu asked coldly. The black fire in his body instantly condensed to the extreme, and suddenly pressed down on Lu Mei. Others naturally could not feel the targeted pressure. Unexpectedly, Lu Mei did not react at all. Yu Qianqiu thought it was bad. Then he remembered that since Lu Mei came from the underworld, he must have crossed the fire sea of the underworld and was not afraid of the black fire at all. He was right, but Lu Mei was not afraid at all. Such a heavy death qi could only be felt by people at the level of underworld sage. As a netherworld knight, he could not condense such a heavy death qi. What scared him the most was that he saw 2 burning black flames jumping in Lu Mei's eyes. However, as Yu Qianqiu quickly restrained the black fire, the 2 burning black flames disappeared again. It was indescribably weird. Lu Mei intuitively thought that Lu Mei's cultivation was higher than his, and it was very likely that he also came from the underworld. His heart was pounding. However, he soon realized that something was wrong. The human aura around the other party was very heavy. It was obvious that he was someone from the human world. If they were from the underworld, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. He was the messenger of the underworld emperor and Lady Hei Qi, who in the underworld dared to make things difficult for him. Even if they were from the celestial world, they still had to respect the emperor of the underworld and Lady Blackpool. But that's not right. People from the celestial realm don't have human qi. That's strange. Amidst his doubts, he calmed himself down and nodded. "I can tell that you aren't an ordinary person. I'm here by the order of the underworld emperor and the decree of the Lady of Blackpool. I hope you can cooperate with me and tell me the information about those 2 people." The politeness of his tone almost made the group of people's eyeballs fall out of their sockets. The title of this sovereign had also changed to this envoy. Nongju is even more stunned. It turns out that this strange green-robed man is easily frightened. He only bullies the weak and fears the strong. Ziyi's face was filled with admiration. However, Furong didn't think it was a big deal. He had always believed that Yu Qianqiu was the best. Seeing him like this, Yu Qianqiu finally felt more at ease. It seemed that the other party still had some scruples about the black fire. Otherwise, his attitude wouldn't have changed so quickly. What he didn't know was that the other party didn't have scruples about the black fire at all. He didn't even think about the black fire. Instead, he was worried about the vigorous dead qi and thought that Furong was a master. In fact, if Yu Qianqiu used the blue fire, the other party would really be afraid. Although the power of the blue fire was not as powerful as the black fire or the legendary purple fire, it was still a raging fire of extreme yang. It was the natural nemesis of the underworld cultivators. Ghost cultivators or meditation cultivators with low cultivation couldn't resist the blue fire at all. They would be burned to death immediately. The power of the earth fire in his body could make the ghost king Meng Yan have a hard time resisting it. Not to mention the blue fire of the 3 true fire, which could be said to be the nemesis of the underworld. Some things were so strange. People thought they couldn't play any role, but in fact, they were very useful. Everything in the world usually had a fixed number. It was the truth that one thing could subdue another. Everything had its own value. As the saying went, lonely yin couldn't grow, and lonely yang couldn't grow. One's loss and the other's gain. The operation of the way of heaven was called balance. Whoever broke the balance would be punished by the way of heaven in order to maintain the balance. Oh. So you were sent by the Emperor of the Underworld and Madame Heichi. Sorry for not recognizing you. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands, as if he had heard of the Emperor of the Underworld and Madame Heichi. However, he had heard of the Emperor of the Underworld. It was estimated that there were very few people in the cultivation world who hadn't heard of him. As for Madame Heichi, who the hell knew who she was? LV May was emboldened. So what if your cultivation is high? Do you dare to disrespect the Emperor of the Underworld and Madame Heichi? But he still cupped his hands and said, please tell me the whereabouts of those two people. Yu Qianzhou nodded and said, I can tell you, but I'm afraid that you can't get in even if you find the place. I advise you to give up the idea of looking for those two people. Even he said so. Could it be a very powerful place? LV May was taken aback. Then he shook his head and said, it doesn't matter. As long as I try my best, I have a clear conscience. His words sounded nice, but in fact, he had already made up his mind. If it was a powerful place, he wouldn't have to look for those two people. He just wanted to find Bai Changchun and get back the stolen things. The most important thing now was to finish this formality and leave as soon as possible. He didn't want to talk nonsense with this strange guy. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and pointed with a smile, saying, go straight to the east, fly over the land, and then cross the vast sea. There is a vast land sealed by a great formation. Few people can enter it. It is called the East Holy Land. There are many highly skilled swordsmen there. Even my cultivation is not worth mentioning there. Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu are there. Then he cupped his hands and said, I wish you good luck, emissary of hell. Hearing this, Nongzhu's eyes brightened. She realized that this was a good way to solve the problem once and for all. Tricking him to go to a place where he couldn't enter, he naturally wouldn't be angry. At that time, he would have to go back to the underworld obediently. The two of them didn't have a deep hatred with the underworld. Would the underworld have to find them? Impossible. That would be too degrading. Nongzhu didn't believe that the legendary emperor of the underworld was so petty. But he was worried about Bai Changchun. But there was no other way. He would save as many people as he could. He could only do this for the time being. The group of demigod lords nodded secretly and exchanged glances. This method was much better than Pei Fang's flattering method. But to them, if something happened to Bai Changchun, it might not be a bad thing. Only Zi thought of big liar again. Pei Fang's face darkened. Why didn't he think of this method in the beginning? This so-called emissary of hell obviously knew nothing about the human world. He was very easy to trick. Thinking of his fawning manner and comparing it to Yu Qianzhou's calm and confident manner, he immediately felt a little embarrassed. It would be embarrassing if this spread out. He was a master at the final stage of demigod realm. He was not even as calm as a junior. He couldn't understand why this emissary of hell seemed to be afraid of Yu Qianzhou. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and was slightly stunned. He couldn't see through his cultivation. Was this the reason? Green Eyebrows was stunned for a while. After hearing Yu Qianzhou's words, he felt that safety was the first priority. He was already prepared to not look for them. He couldn't lose his life just because he came to the human world. Anyway, Mrs. Blackpool didn't know who Nanhai Nongzhu and Yu Qianzhou were. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for telling me. Goodbye." Yu Qianzhou also cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I won't see you out." However, Just when everyone thought that the strange green-robed man was about to leave, they suddenly saw the strange green-robed man's face sink. His eyes suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu, and he said in a stern voice filled with killing intent, "What's your name?" Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He didn't know where he had exposed himself, but he replied calmly, "I'm Zhang San." "Is there a problem?" "I think you're Li Si." "How dare you make fun of me? How dare you?" Green Eyebrows screamed. Damn it. He also knew the legend of Zhang San and Li Si. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know how the other party found out the flaw, he knew that he had been exposed. When he was about to release his divine sense to take Nanhai Nongzhu and the other two away, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Wen Lanfeng. Green Eyebrows screamed, "It seems that there are many people who want to die." Wen Lanfeng held the giant silver sword in his hand, and his body glowed with monstrous fighting intent. Even the wind around him was stirred up. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he said without looking back, "I'm here. Nanhai Nongzhu, take them away. If I die, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the Wen clan." His indomitable killing intent was surging. The second strongest man in the world knew that he was no match for him, but he still wanted to risk his life. If it weren't for the fact that the situation was unclear and he was worried that no one would protect Lu Yanqing, he wouldn't have watched Yin Baikong die like that. Lu Yanqing wanted to save Yin Baikong several times, but he forced her to stop. For him, Lu Yanqing's safety was the most important thing. Now that he found that the green-robed man wouldn't harm others for no reason, Lu Yanqing should be fine. Seeing that even a junior like Yu Qianqiu could face it bravely, and he had promised to take care of Yu Qianqiu in front of Bai Changchun, how could he stay out of it now that Yu Qianqiu was in danger? To be able to stand at the peak of the cultivation world, who didn't have a sense of pride in their hearts? They fought and fought, but they were unwilling to submit to others. No matter how cunning and selfish Yin Baikong was, he would rather die than submit at the critical moment. That magnificent feat of self-detonating his dantian had made Wen Lanfeng's blood boil, and he almost couldn't suppress it. Now that it was time to fulfill his promise to Bai Changchun, he stood up without hesitation. Even if he died, he would fight for his reputation, for his dignity. He didn't want to hide like a turtle and let that woman look down on him, Wen Lanfeng. Nanhai Nongzhu and Lu Yanqing shouted almost at the same time, and their tone was very anxious. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. It seemed that he had to bring 2 more people with him, and 2 more people would know his secret. Just as he released his divine sense, there was suddenly a sonorous hum that sounded like a Vajra subduing a demon. It was cold and arrogant, and it shook people's hearts. Yu Qianqiu's legs went soft, and he almost couldn't stand still. Chapter 658. Yu Qianqiu was just about to curse that scary bastard in his heart, but he suddenly felt something was wrong. The voice was so familiar. He turned around and saw a man standing on the edge of the collapsed God of Wealth Peak, which was as if it had been cut by a knife or an axe. The man stood upright, with his green robe fluttering gently in the wind. With his cultivation, although he couldn't see the man's face clearly, he was too familiar with his majestic and arrogant standing posture. And that signature green robe, Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The old guy came out of the mountain. In fact, he was not the only one who was scared by the cold snort. Many of the low-level cultivators hiding behind the God of Wealth Peak were so scared that they even fell down on the spot, with their ears buzzing. As for the group of deity transformation stage lords, their hearts trembled when they heard that cold snort, which sounded like a Vajra subduing a demon. It was not the first time they heard it. Every time they heard it, what happened next was extremely terrifying. Everyone looked up at the top of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu couldn't see it clearly, but the cultivators of the deification stage saw it clearly. They were all horrified. It was really Bai Changchun, he actually came here. Nongzhu was shocked and murmured, "Why is he here? It's going to be interesting." Ziyi's knuckles turned pale, but she was very excited and her eyes were shining. It turned out that Elder Bai, whom she admired the most, was here. Now, someone was going to teach that green-robed monster a lesson. She was very confident in Bai Changchun. In her eyes, Elder Bai was an invincible legend. LV Mei was not a fool. From everyone's reaction, he could tell that the guy who stood on the top of the mountain and looked into the distance without even looking at them was definitely not an ordinary person. Especially the cold snort just now, his cultivation must be extraordinary. Then he called, Fatty Pei. Pei Fong made a sound of awe and turned around to look at him. LV Mei glanced at the god of wealth Peak coldly and asked, "Who is that old guy up there? Please use your brain, who else could it be?" Pei Fong shook his head with a bitter smile and did not answer. When Lan Feng, who was confronting Lu Mei, lost his surging battle intent and killing intent, he said to Lu Mei indifferently, "He's the one you're looking for, the world's #1 expert, Bai Changchun." Bai Changchun was here. There was no need for him to risk his life to protect Yu Qianqiu and the others. Bai Changchun. Green Eyebrows was startled and suddenly stared at the peak of the mountain. He smiled evilly and said, "You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it by chance." He actually sent himself to his death. That's good, it saves me the trouble of looking for him everywhere. When Lan Feng sneered, "Don't speak too early. I hope you still have a chance to return to the netherworld." He was the only person in the cultivation world who had survived from Bai Changchun's hands twice, so he naturally knew how terrifying Bai Changchun was. The god of wealth sword. It's Yin Baikong's god of wealth sword. How could it be in his hands? The soul formation expert suddenly became restless. Bai Changchun, who was on the god of wealth peak, slowly put down his hands. He was holding a sword in his hand and silently looked at it with a solemn expression. This sword was extremely familiar to all of the soul formation final stage cultivators, especially Pei Fong and the other soul formation final stage cultivators. They were certain that the sword in Bai Changchun's hand was the god of wealth sword that had followed Yin Baikong for many years. Everyone immediately came to a realization. Yin Baikong's god of wealth sword was in the direction of the demon domain. Bai Changchun must have encountered it on his way here and brought it back. On the god of wealth peak, Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong were frightened by Bai Changchun's sudden appearance. Only now did they realize that the sword in Bai Changchun's hand was actually their master's sword. The two of them looked at each other and quickly walked behind Bai Changchun. They knelt down and kowtowed with sobs. "Senior Bai, please avenge our master, Senior Bai." Beside the cliff, the mountain wind was strong. However, the green robe that was fluttering in the wind suddenly stopped. It was as if it was made of stone and iron. It was as if it was connected to its owner's emotions. Bai Changchun faced heaven and earth quietly. His unmoving thin back didn't turn around. His back was facing the two people who were kneeling down. His face was as calm as water and no expression could be seen. A sharp gleam flashed across his eyes and then they became calm again. His eyes seemed to be uninterested in anything. He only stared at the god of wealth in his hand and said indifferently, "I was right. Otherwise, you wouldn't have abandoned your sword." His voice was like that of an ordinary old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. It was quiet, indifferent, serene and unperturbed. Hearing this voice, no one would believe that this was the #1 expert whose name shook the cultivation world. "Junior is useless and can't avenge my master. Please avenge my master, Senior Bai." Sikong Ju kowtowed once again. This time, he was kowtowing heavily on the ground, causing the ground to produce loud bangs. Jing Yuankong kowtowed non-stop along with his senior brother. Among the cultivators who were hiding behind the god of wealth peak, many of them had heard the conversation. After holding their breaths and concentrating, someone suddenly exclaimed, Bai Changchun is here. The #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun, is here. I heard his voice, I heard his voice. There was an indescribable surprise in his tone. The news spread quickly behind the mountain, making the cultivators extremely excited. This caused the large group of cultivators to become extremely excited. They did not expect that the elusive number one expert under the heavens would come and see them. Although they hadn't seen Bai Changchun before, they didn't know where they got the confidence that Bai Changchun would be able to take care of that arrogant green-robed man. It didn't matter if that green-robed man was from the celestial world or the netherworld world. They believed that Bai Changchun would win. To them, the name Bai Changchun was an undefeatable legend in the cultivation world. He was an immortal legend that only existed in legends. He was a monumental monument that no one in the cultivation world could surpass in the past or the future. Ever since they stepped into the cultivation world, they had heard of such a person. He was ethereal and mysterious, and they could never see his true appearance. But every single person they met who talked about this legendary figure had a face full of reverence and sincerity. Over time, this legendary name was engraved in every cultivator's heart, accompanying every cultivator as they grew. That was a legendary figure that every cultivator dreamed of meeting since they stepped into the cultivation world. They tossed and turned restlessly in bed, longing to meet him, but today, that legendary immortal legend didn't disappoint everyone. Just at the critical moment when the underworld messenger was acting arrogantly in the mortal world, he was like a rising sun in the darkness, appearing just in time and giving everyone hope. No matter what kind of enmity everyone had, when faced with bullying and oppression from the outside world, they would always feel a sense of solidarity against a common enemy. Especially those disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce, they hoped that someone could help them vent their hatred. They were perturbed and uneasy. They really wanted to meet that immortal legend. If they missed this opportunity, they would probably never be able to eat or sleep in peace for the rest of their lives. But at this time, they were more or less afraid. Could they go out? But at this time, someone took the lead and threw caution to the wind. One person flew up with a swoosh, circled around God of Wealth Peak, and quickly landed on the edge of the mountain surrounding Cornucopia with his heart thumping wildly. With someone taking the lead, countless figures flew out from behind God of Wealth Peak like locusts, landing on the edge of the mountain surrounding Cornucopia one after another. Each of them were so excited that their gazes jumped around, desperately trying to see that immortal legend on God of Wealth Peak. But with their cultivation, almost no one could see clearly. They could only faintly see a green-robed man standing upright on the mountain peak, but unfortunately, they couldn't see his appearance clearly. Is that the green-robed man? It should be. I saw him too. Although no one could see clearly, that green-robed figure gave everyone incomparably strong confidence. Their tone was one more excited than the other, completely forgetting the situation where they had to flee in a sorry state. The people at the foot of the mountain stared at the top, but Bai Changchun only looked at the sword in his hand. Hearing the sounds of kowtowing behind him, Bai Changchun was silent for a moment, then asked, "How did Yin Bai Kong die?" The two of them straightened their bodies, their faces filled with grief and indignation. Sikong Ju described the process of how his master died in battle in detail. When he talked about how Yin Bai Kong, a dignified soul formation final stage cultivator, self-destructed his dantian to perish together with the enemy, Bai Changchun frowned. He put down the sword in his hand, and his gaze locked onto the green-robed man at the foot of the mountain for the first time. At the foot of the mountain, Lu Mei and Bai Changchun's gazes met, then immediately laughed sharply. What arrogance! Let me see just how high this so-called world's number one expert can be. His figure disappeared without a sound, then suddenly appeared on the opposite side of the mountain peak, hovering in the air, face to face with Bai Changchun less than 10 meters away. The atmosphere in Cornucopia instantly froze. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the top, knowing that the inevitable moment had arrived. Some people had the foresight to know that the foot of the mountain might not be safe, so they quickly flew to the edge of the mountain to observe. Soon, even Yu Qianqiu and the rest also moved away. The foot of the mountain was suddenly left in a mess, and not a single figure could be seen. Lu Mei sized up the green-robed elder, and his heart skipped a beat. He realized that he actually couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. But when he thought about how he also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation at the foot of the mountain, he immediately felt reassured. If it wasn't for that fatty secretly transmitting his voice to him, he would have been fooled. Just think about it, how could there be someone in the world who could surpass the cultivation of a netherworld knight? You're Bai Changchun. Lu Mei sneered sharply. Bai Changchun only glanced at him indifferently, then swung the sword in his hand backwards and said indifferently, "You too, keeping Bai Kong's sword well." The two people who were kneeling hurriedly stood up. Sikong Ju went over to take the sword and retreated with both hands. Then, he heard Bai Changchun say indifferently with his back facing them, "It wasn't easy to establish the World Commerce Association. It's Yin Bai Kong's life's work. You two have to manage it well. Whether it's for the cultivators of the cultivation world or the mortals of the secular world, the World Commerce Association should have the goal of benefiting the world. Otherwise, there's no need for it to exist. Do the two of you understand what I mean?" Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong looked at each other, then bowed in unison and said, "Junior understands." Hearing this, Pei Fong, Qi Zhoujuan, and Ouyang Da's expressions all changed. With Bai Changchun's words, even if Yin Bai Kong died, they could forget about attacking the World Commerce Association in the future. No one would dare to do anything to the World Commerce Association. Unless Bai Changchun died in the hands of the green-robed man. Chapter 659. Seeing that the other party dared to ignore him, Green Eyebrow was instantly enraged. He laughed sinisterly. "What a narrow-minded old thing. Do you really think you're invincible? Today, I'll let you know that there's always someone better than you out there." Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong subconsciously took a few steps back. They all knew what was going to happen next. The aftershock of a battle between such experts would definitely be stronger than Yin Bai Kong's. Before everyone could react, the green-robed envoy had two green thorns in his hands. He turned into a ray of green light and suddenly appeared in front of Bai Changchun. Unexpectedly, Bai Changchun didn't move at all. He just stretched out his hand and inserted it into the ray of green light. It was as if the ray of green light had taken the initiative to enter his hand. The skinny green figure still stood at the edge of the cliff. He had one hand behind his back while the other was stretched out. He was in a stalemate with the ball of green light. The group of soul formation cultivators looked at each other. No one understood what was going on. Could it be that the two of them had started fighting silently? The ball of green light that was in a stalemate suddenly shook violently. It was more appropriate to describe it as struggling. Bai Changchun didn't even look at it. He looked into the distance and said leisurely, "You've got guts. The human world isn't a place where you people from the netherworld can behave atrociously." The shaking green light flickered for a moment before it suddenly revealed itself. It didn't matter if it revealed itself, but it gave everyone a fright. The previously arrogant green-robed envoy was currently being held by the neck by Bai Changchun. He was like a duck being carried by Bai Changchun as he stood at the edge of the cliff. It was so easy and effortless. The green-robed envoy struggled with great difficulty. Unfortunately, he couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. It was as if Bai Changchun was scaring a child. Grabbing a child by the neck and standing on the cliff to scare him. If he didn't listen to him, he would throw him down and kill him. How was that possible? The group of soul formation cultivators were all dumbfounded. It was so easy. Yu Qianqiu couldn't see clearly. He was scratching his head and ears anxiously. He pulled the dumbfounded Nongzhu's sleeves and asked, "How is it? How is it? What's going on?" However, Nongzhu did not come to her senses for a long time no matter how hard he pulled her. Sikong-ju and Jing Yuankong were standing closest to each other, so they had the clearest view. The two of them exchanged glances, and the shock on their faces was hard to conceal. Who would have thought that the Netherworld envoy, who had forced Master to self-destruct his Dantian, would be captured so easily by Bai Changchun? Those who could see this scene clearly were not simple people. Naturally, they knew that this was not a simple coincidence. If not for the fact that his cultivation was far stronger than the other parties, reaching the level where he could lift something heavy as though it were light, there was no way he would be able to grab the other party's neck so easily. Everyone instinctively shrunk their necks. They could not imagine what it felt like to be grabbed by the neck by that hand. Even the green-robed Netherworld envoy, who had such a powerful cultivation, could not move at all. What would happen if it were to grab their necks? For those who were restless and had thoughts of plotting something behind Bai Changchun's back, Bai Changchun's heart was filled with hatred. This grab was even more uncomfortable than grabbing his own neck. Immediately, all his thoughts vanished into thin air. Strong. Too strong. Bai Changchun was indeed Bai Changchun. No wonder he was the #1 expert in the world. He was ridiculously strong. The soul formation experts had no choice but to admit defeat. When Lan Feng, who had been staring at the god of wealth peak, could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Only now did he realize how big the gap between him and Bai Changchun was. It was not just a small gap. He could survive from Lu Xing's hands twice. Even he did not believe that Lu Xing did not show mercy. With his neck tightly gripped, Lu Xing's pale face turned black. He bounced his limbs like a toad, looking very miserable. He wanted to stab the green thorns in his hands forward, but the moment he raised his hands, the pressure on his neck increased. He had no choice but to withdraw his hands obediently. The terrifying energy from that hand suppressed the netherworld energy in his body to the point that he did not even have the chance to release the green thorns. Bai Changchun's leisurely gaze fell on the half-dead Lu Mei, who was bouncing up and down. He said indifferently, "Didn't you want to let me know that there is always someone better than me in the world? I've been waiting for this day for almost 2,000 years. Don't let me down. Show me all you've got." Ga. Green eyebrows let out a strange sound from his throat, his eyes bulging outwards. He felt that Lu Xing's hand suddenly increased when he said that. His neck was on the verge of breaking. If Lu Xing exerted more pressure, his neck would probably be separated from his body. Bai Changchun stared at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "Show me all you've got. Don't think about running, or you'll die miserably. Do you understand?" Sikong-ju and Jing Yuankong were dumbfounded. The minds of all the soul formation stage lords went completely blank. Caw. Caw. Green Eyebrow couldn't utter a complete word in her throat. She tried her best to move her head slightly to show that she understood. After Bai Changchun understood what he meant, he raised his hand and threw Lu Mei down the mountain with a whoosh. Before anyone could react, they heard a loud boom and felt the ground beneath their feet tremble. Dust was rising at the foot of the mountain, and a huge hole was faintly discernible in the dust. When the smoke and dust dissipated, everyone saw a man covered in dust. He was hugging his neck as he tried to adjust himself. His green robe had already turned gray, and his hair was a mess. Black blood seeped out of his 7 orifices. He no longer looked like the arrogant netherworld envoy he had been before. The soul formation cultivators looked at each other and were speechless. As for those cultivators with average cultivation, even if they could not see clearly, they could tell from the situation that one was still standing on the mountain peak while the other had dug into the ground to eat dirt. They naturally knew that Bai Changchun had won the first exchange of blows. Bai Changchun, the undefeatable legend, did not let them down. They were extremely excited. After the green eyebrows in the pit slightly adjusted, it turned into a green light and flashed to the sky again. Looking down at Bai Changchun, it laughed fiercely. "Just now, I was just careless and gave myself to you. Now, I will let you know the price of being rude to me." The sharp voice reverberated in the air. It was very ear-piercing. He didn't even know what was going on just now. It was as if he had delivered himself into the hands of the other party, and he almost died of depression. However, he did not dare to be careless now. He had personally experienced that the other party's cultivation was indeed extraordinary. However, he was sure that it was a momentary mistake. Letting him go was the biggest mistake of his life. Bai Changchun looked up at the sky and said calmly, "I'll wait. I'll let you make the first move." Lu Xing stopped smiling. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of black blood on the 2 green thorns. Then, he held the 2 green thorns in his hands and spread them out devoutly. He muttered something as if he was offering a sacrifice. Suddenly, the 2 green thorns came together in his palms. He rubbed his palms together and the 2 green thorns gave off a dazzling green light. The light was so bright that no one dared to look at it directly. Suddenly, the green light disappeared and a hazy black cloud appeared in the sky. Lu Xing stood on the cloud and sneered at the peak of the mountain. Green light was faintly discernible in the rolling black cloud. Fierce roars came from inside, as if there were some ferocious monsters inside. The people below were shocked. They had never seen such a scene in the cultivation world. Many people even complained that Bai Changchun should not have shown mercy. They were in big trouble now. Bai Changchun stared at the rolling black cloud in the sky and asked calmly, "This should be a spell from the netherworld, right?" "Yes." Lu Xing laughed strangely. 2 gigantic snake heads that were as big as round tables poked out from the dark clouds behind him. Their red eyes were even bigger than 2 fists put together, revealing an extremely ferocious brilliance as they patrolled the surroundings. They opened their bloody mouths and flicked their forked tongues with a hissing sound. Their bodies, which were as thick as water buckets, continuously came out of the black clouds and coiled behind Lu Mei like 2 flying dragons. Just the pressure emitted by the 2 giant snakes was enough to make those with weaker cultivations tremble in fear. These are the 2 green hell snakes that Lady He Qi subdued. I didn't expect to use them in the human world today. Bai Changchun, you're really lucky. Green eyebrows kept laughing in a strange manner. Bai Changchun nodded slightly and said, "I've heard that there are magical spells in the netherworld and the immortal world. I've seen the spell from the immortal world more than 200 years ago. It seems to be much stronger than yours. Is this your most powerful ability? If you have more, why don't you show it to me?" He was not afraid of trouble at all. He had seen the spells from the immortal world. The lords in the soul formation stage looked at each other, not knowing whether Bai Changchun was telling the truth or not. Even Nongzhu was confused. He had never heard Bai Changchun mention it, but he believed that Bai Changchun was not a liar. If he said he had seen it, then he must have. On the other hand, Yu Qianzhou believed this because he had heard Bai Changchun mention that 200 years ago, he had met an immortal who had appeared out of nowhere. The 2 of them had even fought, and after fighting for half a day, that immortal had been killed by Bai Changchun. He guessed that Bai Changchun was talking about that time. You really don't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. This treasure was given to me by Lady He Qi. It is more than enough to deal with you. After Lu Mei finished speaking, she felt proud of herself. She threatened, "Bai Changchun, if you know what's good for you, hand over the knocker and the 2 beast teeth you stole from the underworld gate. Kowtow and apologize. If I'm satisfied with your attitude, maybe I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead." Then he raised his head and laughed crazily. His sharp laughter echoed between heaven and earth, mixed with the pleasure of revenge. Bai Changchun did not get angry. Instead, he asked calmly, "In that case, this is already your most powerful ability." Chapter 660. Hee hee. Lu Mei laughed sinisterly and said, Bai Changchun, I'll give you one last chance. Hand over the thing and surrender to me. Otherwise, you'll learn from that old thing's fate. I have it. Come and get it yourself if you can, Bai Changchun said lightly. You really don't know what's good for you. Lu Mei let out a shrill laugh and sank into the dark clouds. In an instant, the two green snakes became restless. They let out earth-shattering roars and radiated a powerful aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. The gloomy and cold air of the netherworld quickly shrouded the sky and earth. The dark clouds in the sky surged in all directions, blotting out the sky and immediately turning the place into a dark netherworld. The two giant green snakes shuttled through the dark clouds like green lightning. The chilly wind swept across like bone-scraping knives. Those cultivators below the soul formation stage could no longer hold on and fled into the distance. The group of soul formation stage lords were also frightened by this earth-shattering aura. They had never seen such a grand scene before. They originally wanted to leave, but this kind of rare battle scene was irresistible to them. At their level of cultivation, it was difficult to see a battle beyond their imagination. Every time they saw one, they would gain some knowledge and it could be said to be of great benefit to their own cultivation. They were afraid of being affected, but they didn't want to give up such a good opportunity. Therefore, they released their protective aura in advance and watched attentively, not wanting to miss a single detail. Nongzhu's face was solemn. It was also the first time he saw Bai Changchun fight with such an expert. He tilted his head and nodded at Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng quickly brought Yu Qianqiu and the other two into his protective aura energy. On the dark mountain peak, Bai Changchun still stood motionless. He clenched one fist at the back of his waist and put the other down gently, as if he had the desire to make a move. The moment he put down one hand, Sikongju and Jing Yuankong's pupils shrank. At the same time, they felt an indescribable aura emanating from the thin body. It was incomparably thick and spread between heaven and earth. The mountain peak that was covered by the dark and evil aura was instantly pushed away by a mighty aura. The dark and evil oppressive aura that was imposed on the two of them was instantly swept away. The two of them couldn't tell what was going on, but they suddenly felt their hearts filled with righteousness. The thin figure in front of them instantly became incomparably majestic in their hearts. It was as if he had already fused with heaven and earth, becoming a part of heaven and earth, coexisting eternally with heaven and earth. Everyone at the foot of the mountain stared at the mountain peak. In their eyes, the mountain peak that was originally so dark that they could not see clearly suddenly emitted a faint brilliance. Upon closer inspection, there was no light at all. However, the strange thing was that everything could be seen clearly on the God of Wealth Peak, which was further away. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Bai Changchun, I didn't expect you to have some skills. Green eyebrows sinister laughter came from the depths of the dark clouds. Bai Changchun, on the other hand, had Chu Tian's eyes. He saw that in the sky above the forest, there were birds that could not escape in time. When they flew up and touched the dark clouds in the sky, they immediately fell down. The forest below was also withering and dying at a visible speed. His eyes flickered, and his lips moved slightly. A sonorous voice like that of a Vajra subduing a demon echoed between heaven and earth. I originally wanted to spare your life for the time being and slowly interrogate you. But now it seems that I can't let a scourge like you live in this world. Arrogant. An angry shout came from the depths of the dark clouds. Two giant green snakes that were shining brightly stirred up huge waves in the ink-like dark clouds. Ha! They roared at the sky and intertwined with each other, forming a two-headed snake. They opened their bloody mouths at the same time, and with a rumbling sound, they pounced towards the mountain peak like green lightning. Bai Changchun's green robe suddenly fluttered. He stopped looking into the distance, looked up, and waved one hand, pointing at the sky. He put two fingers together, and a dazzling white light that was 6 meters long and 2 meters wide appeared. The moment the dazzling white light left his hand, there was a bang like a thunderbolt on a clear day. The blast formed a powerful shock wave that spread out. Even the soul formation stage cultivators 1,000 meters away had to circulate their chi to resist it. Those with weaker cultivation were immediately pushed by the powerful shock wave along with their protective aura, and slid on the ground for more than 10 meters before they stopped. The group of people was terrified. They didn't expect that they could still be affected even though they were hiding 1,000 meters away. At this time, everyone had no time to think about anything else. While trembling in fear, they stared at the sky without blinking, for fear of missing a wonderful moment. They saw that the sharp light that seemed to be able to split the sky and earth illuminated the surroundings as if it was daytime. It whistled towards the 2 giant green snakes that were pouncing towards it. The 2 arrogant green snakes seemed to feel afraid in the face of such a fierce and earth-shaking attack. They panicked and wanted to dodge. However, they forgot that in order to increase the power of the attack, the 2 snakes had tangled into one, so it was a bit troublesome to dodge. They couldn't understand each other, so they opened their heads to one side. They wanted to dodge, but their bodies were connected to each other. They screamed in horror and wanted to scatter, but their long bodies were tangled together, making it difficult to separate. In the end, it was a bit too late. Bai Changchun didn't make a move, but once he made a move, it was a fatal blow. The shocking light shot towards the center of the entangled 2 giant snakes. It was stable, accurate, ruthless, and fast. It was precisely the center where the 2 giant snakes were entangled. The sharp light that was as bright as a comet broke through the 2 giant snakes effortlessly with a swoosh. It didn't stop there. It glided across the sky brilliantly, piercing through the dark clouds and causing them to undulate uneasily. Ah! Ah! 2 shrill screams echoed in the sky. Because the 2 giant snakes were entangled together, they were split in the middle. Instantly, they were cut into more than 10 pieces. Black blood with a fishy smell fell down like rain. What else do you have? Show me. Bai Changchun stood at the peak of the mountain and shouted. His voice resounded between heaven and earth. In the dark clouds, Lu Mei was already dumbfounded. The green thorn of the nether snake that Madame Blackpool had given him was his trump card. He had dealt with many people in the netherworld with it, but he didn't expect it to be so vulnerable in the hands of his opponent. That frightening light had already scared him out of his wits. Just this move alone wasn't something he could defend against. It was too powerful. He didn't have any more powerful skills to use. Escaping was the most important thing now. When Lu Mei came back to his senses, his first thought was to escape. You've brought disaster to the human world, and you still want to run away. Bai Changchun, who was at the peak of the mountain, quickly sensed his opponent's movement. He shouted angrily and teleported to the sky. His thin body waved his arms in the air and shouted angrily, "Lost immortal finger." In an instant, the airflow between heaven and earth rapidly surged toward the thin figure in the sky. The majestic airflow instantly condensed in the fingers that were waving and circulating. Suddenly, countless dazzling lights shot into the sky. Although it was many times smaller than the shocking light from before, it was uncountable at this moment. Swoosh swoosh, the sound of the air exploding was endless. Countless dazzling white lights shot into the sky like a meteor shower, directly turning the dark clouds in the sky into sieves. The dark clouds were densely covered with white holes. Aw! A shrill scream came from the dark clouds. A mass of green light fell out of the dark clouds and turned into Lu Mei in the blink of an eye. He fell to the ground with a bang, clutching his chest and rolling on the ground, wailing incessantly. Black blood oozed from all over his body. He didn't look like a human anymore. No one knew how many holes there were in his body. Nongzhu looked at Lu Mei, who was rolling on the ground, and said blankly, "Damn it. It's lost immortal finger again." When Lanfeng recovered from the shock and turned his head to ask, "Have you seen Bai Changchun before?" Nongzhu looked back at him with a malicious smile and said, "You're lucky. You didn't see how miserable Li Duxing was 500 years ago. Except for losing an arm. Hey. How do you think he got those 80 holes in his body?" Li Duxing was also unlucky. He happened to meet Lao Bai, who had comprehended lost immortal finger. So he used him to try it. Don't you think you're lucky? When Lan Feng looked at his intact body and then at the wailing emissary of hell on the ground, he shuddered subconsciously. Everyone looked at Bai Changchun, who looked like a god of death in his cyan robe fluttering in the air. They opened their mouths wide and were dumbfounded. Bai Changchun was indeed Bai Changchun. He still acted in the same way. Once he made a move, someone would be doomed. Bai Changchun, who was floating in the air, glanced at Lu Mei, who was rolling on the ground, and snorted. Then he looked up at the dense dark clouds above his head. Nobody knew what he was thinking about. Suddenly, he put his hands behind his back and stood straight in the air. He shouted solemnly, "There is righteousness in the world. Awe-inspiring righteousness. Subdue demons." His words were sonorous and reverberating between heaven and earth. In an instant, the air and the space where everyone was suddenly solidified. The surging dark clouds in the sky also gradually became still. Soon after, everyone was keenly aware that a mighty airflow was surging over from all directions. As it passed by them, everyone immediately felt that the dark and evil aura that was suppressing them had been taken away, and their hearts were suddenly relaxed. The mighty airflow surged endlessly and formed a tornado with Bai Changchun as the center. It rose into the sky and kept spinning in the air. The surrounding dark clouds gradually gathered towards the tornado. The sky that was covered by the dark clouds gradually shrunk, and the surroundings began to see light again. Then, the tornado dragged an ink-like black curtain straight into the sky. The light shone brightly, and the black dot in the sky gradually disappeared. Everyone's gaze shifted from the disappearing black dot to Bai Changchun with great difficulty. They were all dumbfounded. Nongzhu's handsome face became that of an idiot. They wondered how many things about Lao Bai that he did not know. Furong looked around, her face full of disbelief. Ziyi looked at Bai Changchun and kept giggling. Yu Qinzhou's reaction was the most exaggerated. The saliva he had been holding back finally flowed out of his mouth. He continuously smacked his lips and swallowed. He looked at Bai Changchun with a pitiful expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 661. In the bright and beautiful sky, the figures suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Bai Changchun landed on the ground and stared at the rolling green eyebrows. As soon as the latter saw the person standing in front of him, even though he was in pain, he crawled up, knelt down, and kowtowed. He begged again and again, "It's me who failed to recognize you. Great Immortal, please spare my life, please spare my life." There were at least dozens of holes on his hands, legs, and body. Black blood kept flowing out of his body, so he was lucky to be alive. However, looking at his skillful kowtowing, it really made everyone's eyes pop out. There was no trace of his previous arrogant and domineering appearance. Bai Changchun stared at him coldly and said indifferently, "Compared to the guy 200 years ago, you are far inferior. He still had the strength to fight with me, but you can't even withstand a single blow. At the same time, there is a problem that I have been thinking about for more than 200 years. Let's talk about you. Your cultivation is obviously not as good as mine, but we set off from the Demon Ghost region at the same time, and I can't catch up with you in terms of speed. I'm very puzzled. Can you explain it to me?" "Yes. Green Eyebrows nodded repeatedly, crawled on the ground, and hurriedly replied, "As long as Great Immortal spare my life, I will tell you the truth." "Are you bargaining with me?" Bai Changchun said indifferently. I dare not. Green Eyebrows hurriedly kowtowed. He could feel the killing intent in the other party's words. Bai Changchun snorted coldly, "If you don't answer, die. If I'm not satisfied with your answer, die. I'll tell you, I'll tell you." Green Eyebrows' face was covered with black blood, but it still couldn't hide the horror on his face. He said in a trembling voice, "Although I don't know why, with great immortals' cultivation, you should have ascended to the immortal realm long ago. Otherwise, the flesh and blood of the human world can't bear such a strong cultivation like great immortal. The passage to the immortal realm has the effect of refining the body. It was only during the process of ascending that a new body was forged that it could withstand a stronger cultivation, and thus continue to climb to the peak of cultivation. This is just like the netherworld fire on the way to the underworld, which can also refine a new body for ghost cultivators in the human world. This is also why the cultivators of the mortal world are often inferior to the cultivators of the immortal world and the netherworld. Of course, you are an exception, great immortal." Bai Changchun nodded thoughtfully and said to himself, "So that's how it is. I understand now. So it was my body that restricted the use of my cultivation. I had noticed this a long time ago. No wonder. Unfortunately, no one has been able to go to the immortal world yet, not even me." Lu Mei, who was prostrating at the side, raised her bloody face and asked weakly, "Great immortal, can you let me go now?" Bai Changchun met his pitiful pleading gaze and asked expressionlessly, "If I kill you, do you think the underworld will send a stronger person?" "Ah!" Green Eyebrows screamed like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, "Great immortal, please don't kill me. If you kill me, Madame Blackpool will know immediately. She has many experts under her command and will definitely send experts from the underworld to trouble you. I am just a nobody in the underworld. Great immortal, you don't have to offend Madame Blackpool for me. When I go back, I will erase the matter of the gate of the underworld in front of Madame Blackpool. I guarantee that no one from the underworld will come to the mortal world to trouble you. Great immortal, please think twice." Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Nongzhu shook her head and sighed, thinking, "You are such an unlucky guy. Why did you have to say that Madame Blackpool has many experts under her command? If I kill you, she will send experts from the underworld to trouble me. It will be strange if Crazy Ol doesn't kill you. If you say that you will send experts to trouble Crazy Ol after you go back, Crazy Ol will let you go immediately." As expected, Bai Changchun's eyes lit up. He stared at Lu Mei and asked, "When people from the underworld come to the mortal world, do they all come out from the place where you came from?" Lu Mei was stunned. She didn't know what he meant. But to save her life, she answered honestly, "Yes, that is the passage from the underworld to the mortal world." Bai Changchun nodded slightly and said, "In that case, I only need to stay at the entrance of the cave to wait for the experts from the underworld to come out. Since I can't go to the underworld, this is a good idea." Lu Mei's small eyes suddenly opened wide. He would be an idiot if he still didn't understand what Ning Ke meant. Before he opened his mouth to beg for mercy, Bai Changchun waved his sleeve. Bang! Ah! Green Eyebrow screamed and flew into the air. When he fell, several sharp lights shot out from Bai Changchun's fingers. After a few swishes, Lu Mei was cut into several pieces and fell down. Before people could react, a shadow flew across the sky and disappeared in the direction of the demon ghost region. Bai Changchun left just like that. People looked at each other and felt that what happened just now was like a dream. However, the completely destroyed treasure bowl in front of them clearly told them that it was true. In the distance, the dozens of pieces of the giant snake and Lu Mei's body began to squeak and emit black smoke under the scorching sun. Under people's gazes, they soon became pools of black juice. This was the result of Bai Changchun's battle. However, when they thought of Bai Changchun's miraculous means just now, they all shuddered. He was too powerful. Especially the conversation between Bai Changchun and the Netherworld envoy. it exposed a very important piece of information. Bai Changchun's cultivation had long surpassed the soul formation stage. At the same time, people also learned the secret of why the people of the immortal world and the underworld were stronger than the cultivators of the human world. The entire treasure bowl had almost all traces of its creator erased. Only the remnants of the God of Wealth Peak were left. At the top of the God of Wealth Peak, Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong were kowtowing in the direction that Bai Changchun disappeared in, thanking the benefactor who avenged their master. The two of them had to fulfill the instructions left behind by this benefactor. If they didn't, he said that there was no need for the world commerce to exist. No one doubted his words in the past, and no one doubted his words now. After a long time, the two of them slowly stood up. The two of them faced the breeze and looked down the mountain. Not long ago, their master, Yin Bai Kong, would often stand on the mountain peak and look down, looking at the foundation that he had single-handedly built. At the foot of the mountain, the various lords summoned their inner sect disciples to dig out their belongings from the ruins. Then, they dispersed without any obstruction. Because the defensive formation that Yin Bai Kong had personally set up had been completely destroyed, it could no longer stop anyone. Seeing the people leaving, the two of them looked at each other with complicated gazes. No matter if it was because of the old grudges or the new grudges because of the 7 treasure pill, no one would find trouble with them anymore. Although the pillar of the world commerce was no longer here, the words that Bai Changchun had left behind were enough to intimidate everyone. As long as Bai Changchun was still here, no one in the cultivation world would dare to find trouble with the world commerce. Sikong Ju raised the God of Wealth sword in his hand. The two of them looked at each other silently. In the past, their master had always wanted to curry favor with Bai Changchun to ensure the safety of the world commerce. Who would have thought that not only would he not be able to fulfill this wish when he was alive, he would be able to fulfill it after his death. Some things that happened due to fate were often fated in the unseen world. It really couldn't be forced, junior brother. How about we work together to revive the world commerce? Of course. Other than completing Senior Bai's instructions, just like what Senior Bai said, the world commerce is Master's life's work. But I'm worried, the day of the East Holy Land's opening isn't far away. I'm afraid that we won't be able to fulfill our wish. Master once told me. Sikong Ju looked at Jing Yuankong and said solemnly, the past torture envoys of the demon ghost region were all outstanding figures. If one left, another would appear. The demon ghost region had been passed down from ancient times until now. Who knows how many secrets it had? No one dared to take it lightly. Not to mention anything else, just the countless demon kings and ghost kings in the demon ghost domain were the most powerful force in the world. They could easily wipe out any force in the cultivation world. Although the past torture envoys of the demon ghost region didn't easily interfere with the matters of the cultivation world, the demon ghost region was the true #1 power in the cultivation world. Since Senior Bai had spoken, even if he left, no one in the cultivation world would dare to touch the world commerce. Of course, the prerequisite is that we follow Senior Bai's words. That's good. We can do business in peace and cultivate in peace. We don't have to be afraid of being disturbed. I'm going to recall the people from the Limitless Island. The world commerce shouldn't interfere with the matters of the cultivation world anymore. Sikong Ju asked, what do you think? Jing Yuankong nodded and said, I agree. Sikong Ju didn't say anything else. He began to gather the disciples of the world commerce to clean up the things that belonged to the sect. Now that Yin Bai Kong was dead, Jing Yuankong didn't fight with him anymore. He naturally became the new leader of the world commerce. At the foot of the mountain, after the Blue Palace disciples finished cleaning up the ruins, Pei Fong waved his hand and let them go. He stood with Qi Zhoujuan and O Yangda. Looking at the devastation, the three of them looked at each other and sighed. Although the trouble this time was caused by the underworld envoy, the three of them couldn't help but associate it with Bai Changchun. Every time that old monster appeared, he would do something shocking. In fact, didn't the underworld envoy come to find him? They really hoped that he wouldn't appear again. Pei Fong glanced at Wen Lanfeng and the others who were still standing at the edge of the mountain and said to the two beside him, "Let's say goodbye to them before we leave." The three of them quickly went to Wen Lanfeng and the others. Pei Fong cupped his hands and said, "Everyone, we'll take our leave now. We welcome you to visit the Blue Palace if you have the chance." He deliberately smiled at Furong and said, "Miss Furong, if there's anything you need my help with in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. Just find a disciple of the Blue Palace to pass on the message. I'll do my best." Furong smiled and nodded. Then, she heard Nongzhu sneer and say, "Fatty Pei, there's something I don't understand and I need to ask you. You said that the strange green-robed man was fooled by Yu Qianqiu. Why did he suddenly turn against him when he was about to leave?" "Yes. I also find this strange." Pei Fong shook his head with a puzzled expression, appearing to be in disbelief. The others knew that Nongzhu wouldn't say such a thing for no reason. Even Qi Zhoujuan and O Yangda looked at Pei Fong suspiciously. Maybe the people of the underworld have some supernatural power that we don't know about. Pei Fong sighed and cupped his hands, saying, "Everyone, farewell." After saying that, he flew into the sky. Qi Zhoujuan and O Yangda also cupped their hands and left. Nongzhu snorted and tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu. She believed that with Yu Qianqiu's cunning, he should be able to understand the meaning of her words. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would turn a deaf ear to him? His eyes were fixed on the ruins. Just when the group was baffled, Yu Qianqiu suddenly let out a loud cry and rushed into the ruins of the broken fences and dilapidated walls. Chapter 662. Stones and broken wooden beams were thrown all over the sky by someone. Yu Qianqiu was working hard in the ruins with a hard-working spirit that was incomparable to ordinary people. But no matter how they looked at him, he seemed to be possessed by a demon. Wen Lanfeng and the others looked at each other. All the sects were digging up their own treasures and disciples who were killed in the war. What was he digging up like a madman? This guy had a lot of treasures. Was he hiding them in that place? Nongzhu raised his eyebrows and touched his chin, pondering. A sinister smile appeared on his face. He looked around and vaguely recognized that the place Yu Qianqiu was digging seemed to be the original location of the Spring Slumber building. The sinister smile on his face froze. Looking at Ziyi, who was curious and eager to try, Nongzhu suddenly looked gloomy. He kind of understood what Yu Qianqiu was looking for. Except for him, perhaps only Lu Yanqing, who was wearing a gauze hat, understood. They could not help but flashed over. Yu Qianqiu buried his head in his work. Each time he dug up a corpse, he would immediately clean up the corpse's face. When he saw that it wasn't the person he was looking for, he didn't care about the consequences and directly threw it away. "You're crazy!" Nongzhu shouted angrily. As soon as he flew over, he happened to catch a female corpse that Yu Qianqiu threw behind, and he also threw it behind. As a result, he almost hit a disciple of another sect. "How dare someone hit me with a corpse?" The disciple was also angry. He straightened up and was about to curse, but his mouth was covered by his fellow disciples. He pointed at Nongzhu and the others. The disciple immediately lost his temper and went to do what he was supposed to do. Yu Qianqiu picked up a wooden beam several meters long, turned around and threw it away. He stared at Nongzhu with a sullen face and said in a low voice, "Don't provoke me." He wiped his face with his dirty sleeve and continued to bury himself in the work. That scene made people feel an inexplicable sadness. They didn't know what he was trying to do to make himself look so miserable. Nongzhu's face was immediately drawn, and she was about to burst into rage. Ziyi, who wanted to join in the fun and dig for treasures, quickly stopped. Furong walked over and asked weakly, "What are you digging?" Let me help you. Just as Yu Qianqiu raised his head and was about to reply, his eyes inadvertently fell on a group of people in front of him, and he was instantly stunned. The enchantress, Yan Yu, Tian Yi, Mo Xiaojun, Hai Wei, and Li Chuxian came together. The six of them saw that he was covered in dirt. He was half-straightened, one hand holding onto a broken window, the other holding onto an arm that was buried under the collapsed wall, and he was looking at them with his dusty face. Yu Qianqiu, what are you looking for? 100 Charm Beauty asked in confusion. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over Yan Yu before he quickly shifted it away. There seemed to be some panic in his eyes. He let go of the arm that was holding the dead body, and threw the broken window as far as he could. He stood up and patted off the dust on his palms. He assumed a confident posture and waved his hand to point at the busy crowd around him. I'm a kind-hearted person. Everyone else is working, but I'm just standing at the side. I feel bad about it, so I've come to lend a hand. Really? 100 Charm Beauty looked doubtful, as if she did not believe what he said. She looked around, but did not find any clues. Of course. Yu Qianqiu nodded with an honest face. However, Furong, who was beside him, believed what he said very much. She pulled his sleeve and said seriously, I will also help you. Ah. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched, and he said awkwardly, forget it. It's fine as long as we have the intention. We can help people for a while, but we can't help them forever. Let's call it a day. We'll talk about it later. After that, he wiped the dust off his buttocks with both hands. It seemed that he was going to quit. Furong nodded and said, oh. Suddenly, an uncontrollable laughter came from the side. The few of them turned their heads to look and discovered that it was Lu Yanqing. When Lanfeng asked curiously, Yanqing, what are you laughing at? Did you think of something funny? Lu Yanqing quickly shook her head and said, nothing. Humph. Stubborn duck. Nongzhu sneered with a face full of disdain. He finally knew that when it came to this kid, he could say anything that was horizontal, straight, and dead. In short, he was the one who was in the right. Hey! Yan Yu, what are you laughing at? 100 Charm Beauty suddenly found that Yan Yu was also biting her lips and laughing. Yan Yu immediately waved her hand and said, nothing. But anyone could see that she was smiling from the bottom of her heart. Her face was bright, and she stood in the ruins, looking unusually dazzling. Everyone present was stunned. Yu Qianqiu naturally knew what she was laughing at, but he was thick-skinned and didn't care, as if he didn't know anything. What can you do to me? When Lanfeng looked at both sides and couldn't see why the two women were laughing, so he asked Nongzhu, what's your plan? Nongzhu looked up at the ruins of the God of Wealth Peak and said, everyone in the cornucopia parted on bad terms. I naturally want to go to Shuntian Island and ask Old Bai how many secrets he has that I don't know. It turns out that the guy's cultivation has surpassed the soul formation stage. He actually hid it from me for so many years. I've long felt that his cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. He's too strong. When Lanfeng smiled bitterly and shook her head. She then asked Yu Qianqiu, what about you? Yu Qianqiu frowned and said slowly, the appearance of the Netherworld envoys and the opening of the East Holy Land are not far away. I always feel that the world is going to change. I hope I'm just overthinking, but I want to settle some things. It's never wrong to be prepared. Some people didn't understand what he meant, but those who knew the inside story understood what he was saying. Once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, his days would be a bit difficult. Although this guy became famous quickly, he had offended too many people. Nongzhu originally had a stomach full of complaints about his promiscuous relationships, but seeing him like this, her eyes became a little sympathetic. Once the East Holy Land was opened, would Bai Changchun really pass the position of the torture master of the demon region to him? If he really did, would he be able to subdue the thousands of demons and ghosts in the demon region? One should know that after Bai Changchun took over the demon region, he also ruthlessly washed the place with blood several times before he completely subdued those demons and ghosts. Could he inherit the glory of the demon region's torture masters? Could he defend against external strong enemies? When she thought that the position of the torture master might fall into this guy's hands, Nongzhu couldn't imagine the reaction of the various forces in the cultivation world when the news was announced. This guy would have a heavy burden on his shoulders in the future. When Lan Feng was silent, he raised his hand and pointed at the temptress and Yan Yu. Are the two of them still going with us? The two girls looked at each other, not knowing what he meant. Yu Qianchou said to the temptress of 100 charms, Yin Baikong is dead, I'm afraid the forces here will be thrown into chaos. The two of you should go to Senior Lu's place in Spirit Fragrant Valley for the time being. I'll think of something in the future. He didn't care whether the two agreed or not. He waved his hand domineeringly and said, It's settled then. The temptress immediately threw a reproachful look, but no matter how you looked at it, it looked like a flirtatious wink. Yan Yu didn't say anything. She just kept staring at Yu Qianchou. However, Yu Qianchou kept avoiding her eyes, but he still arranged an escape route for her in a domineering manner. I'll have to trouble the two seniors. Yu Qianchou bowed to Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing and said, When I find Niu Yud, I'll definitely get the elixir I promised you two seniors. The bright eyes under the green gauze rolled a white eye. Lu Yanqing was speechless, feeling that he thought he did not know that he was Niu Yud. Wen Lanfeng's expression was sluggish. He waved his hand and said, The elixir is not urgent. If you can't find Niu Yud, then forget it. It doesn't matter if you don't have him. He had already eaten something that killed people. After a discussion, they went their separate ways. Nongzhu also took Ziyi and Furong away, leaving Yu Qianchou standing alone in the ruins and looking around. Later, he flew alone to the primeval forest outside the treasure basin. In the back hall of the Dark Nether Palace, Lady Blackpool was still lying naked in the hot spring, being served by 5 handsome and strong pampered men. In the hazy water mist, Lady Blackpool was so comfortable that she closed her eyes and kept moaning under the massage of 10 big hands. At this moment, hurried footsteps came from outside the black veil. They came to the side of the bath made of black jade and stopped. It seemed that they didn't dare to disturb her. Why are you in such a hurry? Is the Minghuang mountain going to collapse? Lady Blackpool snorted and said, If you have something to say, just say it. Maid Feifeng immediately replied, Lumei's memorial tablet is broken. I've asked the guards of the underworld, but Lumei hasn't come back. After that, she didn't say another word. Her slightly closed phoenix eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes flashed for a while, and a majestic momentum directly shook away the 5 pampered men around her. Lady Blackpool disappeared in the hot spring. The black dress on the clothes rack beside the hot spring dashed up and hovered above the hot spring, wrapping her naked body in the dress. Lady Blackpool, who was floating above the hot spring, glanced at Feifeng and suddenly turned into a beam of black light and flew away. She dashed out of the Dark Nether Palace like a shooting star, heading directly to the towering Dark Royal Palace. The serene wood forest had branches but no leaves. As soon as the black light entered the dark serene wood forest, a silver light flashed in front of the small building surrounded by the serene wood forest. The commander of the royal guards of the Dark Royal Palace appeared at the same time. The commander of the royal guards of the Dark Royal Palace stared at Lady Blackpool indifferently and disdainfully, saying indifferently, Blackpool, if you dare to take one more step forward, I don't mind kicking you out of the Dark Royal Palace. Lady Blackpool bit her lips and stopped on her knees, saying, Greetings, Lord Silver Armor. Please tell the Emperor of the Underworld that Blackpool has something important to report. After she learned that the silver armor commander of the Dark Royal Guards was one of the legendary 12 underworld generals of the underworld, she didn't dare to act presumptuously in front of the silver armor commander of the Dark World, no matter how unhappy she was. She knew that the silver armor commander of the Dark Royal Guards had the ability to deal with her. Chapter 663. The indifferent eyes of the soldier in silver armor were startled a bit. It was obvious that he didn't expect Madame Blackpool to kneel down to him. Perhaps the sincerity of Madame Blackpool had moved the underworld emperor. A dignified and calm voice drifted out from the small building. "Say it outside." A few large fireflies flew up from the tree trunks of the deep wood forest and clung to the window of the small building. Madame Blackpool raised her head and saw a man with a noble and elegant temperament appear at the window under the flickering light. His penetrating gaze passed through the deep wood forest and gazed at the night sky in the distance. Then, he slowly looked down. His gentle gaze revealed an unconcealable majesty and indifference, giving people a startling feeling. It was a majesty that seeped out from his bones. "Greetings, Underworld Emperor." Madame Blackpool bowed and said, "Get up and talk." Though the Underworld Emperor said it politely, he didn't mean to let her in. "Thank you, Underworld Emperor." As soon as Madame Blackpool stood up, the Underworld Emperor asked her in a condescending manner, "What's the matter?" Madame Blackpool reported angrily, "Underworld Emperor, something terrible has happened. The underworld envoy I sent to the human world to investigate the stolen item from the gate of the underworld was killed in the human world." Before Madame Blackpool could finish, the underworld emperor interrupted her, "You came to disturb me for this matter." Madame Blackpool was taken aback, and the anger on her face cooled down. She said angrily, "The mortals in the human world are outrageous. They dared to kill the underworld envoy. Blackpool asks the Underworld Emperor to send someone to punish the murderer." The fireflies that were climbing on the window suddenly flew away quickly, as if they were frightened by something. It became dark outside the window. Though there was light in the room, no one could see the expression of the person outside the window. All they could see was a figure with a pair of cold eyes flickering. He said in a deep voice, "Blackpool, do you remember what I said when I agreed to send someone to the underworld?" Madame Blackpool was startled. She sensed the anger in the underworld emperor's words. She knelt down again and said, "Blackpool doesn't dare to forget it. The underworld emperor said that this is the only time. No matter what the result is, it is not allowed to happen again." "What else?" asked the underworld emperor. If it happens again, you don't have to serve me anymore. You should go to the endless dark sea to serve those laborers." It's good that you remember." The Underworld Emperor said emotionlessly, "If you are tired of staying in the dark Nether Palace and want to go to the endless dark bottom to enjoy yourself, I will grant you your wish. Emperor of the Underworld, please calm down. I won't dare to do it again." Madame Blackpool bowed on the ground in fear. "It's good that you understand. If there's nothing else, you can leave," the Underworld Emperor said. "Underworld Emperor, there is one more thing." Heichi straightened his back and said, "The Celestial Realm sent someone to contact me. They said something strange happened in one of the 72 worlds. Countless years have passed and no one from that world ascended to the Celestial Realm. Thus, he sent down 16 guides to investigate, but none of them returned. Recently, someone from that realm sounded the immortal Ascension bugle, but there's still no news of the people they sent out, and they haven't returned. What do you want to say to me?" the Underworld Emperor asked icily. Madame Heichi said respectfully, "They suspect that there might be something wrong with the passage to that world, and they want me to ask the Underworld Emperor to lend me the passage to the underworld." "Heichi, you are from the underworld. When did you become the messenger of the Celestial Realm?" The Underworld Emperor turned around and walked away from the window. His indifferent voice drifted out from the room, "Them? Which them? Do they have the right to negotiate with me? Go back and tell them that they don't have the right to talk to me. Tell Jean Tai to come and talk to me in person. 1,000 soldiers, no one is allowed to trespass this place without my permission. Yes. The silver armor 1,000 soldiers cupped his hands and accepted the order. Then he waved at Madame Hei Chi to send her away. Hei Chi was frightened by the Underworld Emperor's words. When did you become the messenger of the celestial realm? She knew the Underworld Emperor didn't like the people of the celestial realm. Though she didn't know the reason, she knew she had misspoken this time. The Underworld Emperor deprived her of the right to trespass this place. She wanted to explain, but she didn't dare to say anything else. She knelt and kowtowed, saying, Hei Chi will remember. Hei Chi will leave now. Then she turned into a black light and left. After she left, the silver armor 1,000 soldiers appeared on the small building. The Underworld Emperor, who was holding the ancient scroll, said without turning his head, what kind of person did she send to the human world this time? How could he be killed by a cultivator in the human world? The silver armor 1,000 soldiers relaxed when no one was around. He walked to the Underworld Emperor's side and took out an ancient scroll from the bookshelf. He opened it and said, a pampered man called Lu Mei. He was just a clown trying to please the crowd. His cultivation level was not worth mentioning. He was only a mid-stage netherworld warrior. The Underworld Emperor tilted his head and said, the mid-stage netherworld warrior is not worth mentioning, but don't forget that it was the human world. How high do you think the mortal body of a cultivator in the human world can withstand? This person is not simple to kill a mid-stage netherworld warrior. The silver armor 1,000 soldiers was startled. He put the ancient scroll back on the bookshelf and said with a frown, now that you mention it, it is a bit strange. I didn't expect such a person to appear in the human world. Should I go there myself and see who did it? It's not the right time. Let's talk about it later. The Underworld Emperor shook his head slightly. In the middle of Huaxia, in a deep mountain not far from a bustling city, there was a mountain god temple that was full of incense. In front of the temple, there was an endless stream of people who came from the city to burn incense and pray devoutly. Behind the temple, there was a quiet wing built halfway up the mountain. Standing on the platform in front of the wing, one could see the crowd of people coming and going to worship at the foot of the mountain. Under the shade of the trees, Yu Qianqiu quietly looked at the mountain god temple with green smoke curling up. He said with a smile, you two are really good at picking a place. I didn't expect you two would hide here and enjoy the human world. Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi stood on either side of him. Hong Qi had grown into a mature young man after not seeing him for a few years. Hong Qi said with a smile, this is a rundown temple. If we didn't take over it, it wouldn't be so full of incense. I heard that the Hong Gang and Qing Gang suddenly appeared in the Huaxia cultivation world. I know it's the two of you. Yu Qianqiu looked around and joked, you two are really famous. Hong Qi said with an embarrassed smile, how can we be as famous as you, master? We're just making a small ruckus in the Huaxia cultivation world. We only managed to make a ruckus by taking advantage of the trouble on Wuji Island. Otherwise, we would have been wiped out by the righteous and demonic sections. But master, you're famous all over the world. I heard that you're the #1 expert below the soul formation stage. I'm honored. I haven't seen you for a few years and you've learned how to be glib. Looks like you've gotten a lot of benefits. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and stared at Gu Qingyun. How is it? It's freer than you on that Fuxian island, right? Gu Qingyun smiled and joked, at least I don't have to bow and bow all day like I did on Fuxian Island. I'm now the leader of the world-famous Qing Gang. I'll rob anyone who dares to mess with me. He had been living in the outside world for so many years and had accepted many things. It was just like what Yu Qianqiu said. If he was still on Fuxian Island, he might not be able to break through to the core formation stage. Hong Qi laughed and said, that's right. Fuxian Island is nothing. Sect leader Feng Xiangtian has sent invitations to us in the cultivation world several times, but we've been too lazy to care. So what if we're the #1 sect in the world? Gu Qingyun rolled his eyes and said mockingly, "Don't be so arrogant here. Do you think Feng Xiangtian is so easy to mess with? If it wasn't for Wuji Island, he would have come to destroy us a long time ago. You haven't stayed on Fuxian Island, so you don't know. Fuxian Island is very powerful. To be able to dominate the cultivation world for so many years, there must be many hidden experts in the late stage of tribulation passing." Hong Qi said disapprovingly, "What are you afraid of? With Master's current reputation, we can just use Master's name at the crucial moment. I don't think Fuxian Island will dare to act rashly against us." The two of them glanced at each other, then looked at Yu Qianqiu and chuckled. They indeed had a sense of superiority. All the sects in the cultivation world were worried that they would be attacked by the spirit-severing experts of the various countries and lived in fear. On the other hand, they had the foundation laid by Yu Qianqiu in the various countries. They didn't have to worry about anything. When they had nothing to do, they could rob others and live like kings. Gu Qingyun asked curiously, "Boss, why did you suddenly come to find us?" "Yes." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "I heard that almost all the independent cultivators in the cultivation world listen to your orders. I also heard that you guys are quite a deterrent to the small sects of the righteous and demonic Tao. So, I came to find you two to ask for your help." Hong Qi asked curiously, "With Master's ability, do you still need our help?" Yu Qianqiu glared at him and looked into the distance. Soon, the millions of soldiers that have been occupying the western region of the cultivation world for a long time will march out and conquer the entire cultivation world. You two keep a close eye on those sections. If anyone dares to interfere, teach them a lesson. Don't be polite, I'll take care of it." The two looked at each other. They knew that Shi Wenguang was Yu Qianqiu's man, but they didn't expect them to collude and make preparations to conquer the world. Gu Qingyun frowned and said, "We can barely deal with those small sects, but those large sects. Boss, to be honest, we can't stop them. I'll give each of you 1,000 men from the Utopia army." Yu Qianqiu turned around and stared at the two of them. "You don't have to worry about those large sections. I'll deal with them. Is there any problem?" Their eyes lit up. They naturally knew the power of the Utopia army. Hong Qi asked weakly, "Master, are they all early-stage tribulation transcendence experts?" Yu Qianqiu nodded. Hong Qi immediately rubbed his hands excitedly and said, no problem at all. "Master, when will you give us that person?" "I'll give him to you now." "Prepare early," Yu Qianqiu said. The two of them excitedly led him deep into the mountains. Chapter 664. At the western border of Huaxia, there was a culture and customs of a foreign land, with merchants from all over the world coming and going. In the hundreds of miles of barracks at the border, the army trained day in and day out. For many years, the army had been in a state of constant preparation for war. Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared at the back of the main tent. When the cultivators he sent saw him, they were surprised at first, then happy, but when they wanted to salute him, he waved his hand to stop them. Gently pulling the curtain aside, he saw Shi Wenguang and his son sitting around the table, gesturing with their hands to draw a map. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to step out, he suddenly heard Shi Intian muttering, "Father, are we really going to keep waiting like this? The army has been training like this for a long time, everyone will get tired, it's not good for the morale of the army." "Shut up, Mr. Yu will naturally have arrangements." Shi Wenguang signaled to the back of the tent with his eyes, hinting him not to speak carelessly. There were still people sent by Yu Qianqiu. Then he said in a low voice, "Don't think I don't know, you've been secretly sending a group of people back to the capital, what are you planning?" "I knew I couldn't hide it from father." Shi Intian smiled bitterly, I've sent people back to spy on the situation, to see if there's a chance to bring everyone back. Our family has been separated for too long, it's not a good idea to continue like this. Shi Wenguang also sighed and shook his head. It's easier said than done, the imperial court has probably sent people day and night to keep an eye on them. Even if they can escape from the capital, it's a long journey, and there's also a heavy military presence. How can they make it? I'm afraid we can only ask for Mr. Yu's help. Yu Qianqiu smiled, opened the curtain, and walked out. The day of the Grand General's family reunion is not far away. The father and son looked over, and when they saw him, they were overjoyed and cupped their hands together. Greetings, Mr. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at them, indicating that there was no need to be so polite, then looked at them carefully. Perhaps it was because of the hardships at the border. Shi Tian already had the image of a middle-aged man. On the other hand, Shi Wenguang was still healthy and strong. Even after a few years, there were still no signs of aging on his face, most likely due to the pills. Yu Qianqiu's eyes finally landed on Shi Tian, smiling. Looks like the young general can't wait any longer and is eager to reunite with his family. Shi Wenguang was slightly startled, knowing that Yu Qianqiu had heard his son's grumbling. He hastily cupped his hands in apology and said, "It's all my son's fault. He's insensible and full of nonsense. Please forgive him. Great General, you think too much. Who doesn't want their family to be reunited? This is human nature. What crime is there?" After saying that, Yu Qianqiu walked to the entrance of the tent with his hands clasped behind his back and looked at the soldiers training outside. Amidst the deafening battle cries, he nodded in satisfaction. The father and son followed behind. Shi Wenguang asked, "Just now, Mr. said that the day of my family reunion is not far away. What does Mr. mean?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and strode to the commander's seat in the center. He stared at the two and asked, "If I let you make sufficient preparations before the battle, how long would it take for you to finish?" The father and son looked at each other, understanding the meaning behind Mr. Grand General's words. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Shi Tian could not wait to answer. Half a month is enough." Yu Qianqiu frowned, staring at Shi Wenguang. "Grand General, you are an expert in war, but you can't afford to rush. I'll give you a month to prepare, is that enough?" Shi Tian immediately knew that he was being too impulsive. Shi Wenguang also glared at him, then replied, "Actually, we have always been preparing, it's just a small battle, the army can be mobilized at any time. If it's a big battle, it will take some time, but a month's time difference is not bad." "Good. Then I'll give you a month's time. A month later, I will bring your family back safely on time." Yu Qianqiu looked out of the tent, and waved his hand. "Time doesn't wait for me. 1 month later, the army will march east. I will not directly intervene in the war between mortals, nor will I let other cultivators interfere. I've given you a chance. When the time comes, let's see if your Shi family has the ability to change the dynasty of Huaxia, and earn your Shi family's eternal inheritance." After waiting for so many years, the day had finally arrived. The father and son were so excited that they could not speak, and they bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu stood at the top of a lush tree in the depths of a mountain forest. In front of him was a large manor that was connected together. Behind the manor was a huge waterfall. The rushing water split into two along the river, circling around the manor on both sides before merging into a single river and going far away. This huge manor was like a paradise. It was none other than the Wu clan, one of the 4 major clans that Yu Qianqiu had not set foot in for many years. Above his head, there were cultivators flying past, some alone, some in pairs, and some in groups of 3 to 5, rising and landing on the Wu clan's Hat Island. No one would pay attention to a cultivator who looked relatively young. Even if they occasionally saw him, they would just quickly pass by, not bothering to pay attention. When separating from Gu Qingyun, Yu Qianqiu mentioned that he was going to the Wu clan, and Gu Qingyun immediately informed him that the Wu clan's grand auction that was held once every 5 years was about to be held. Looking at the bustling scene deep in the old forest in front of him, Yu Qianqiu sighed endlessly. Time passed so quickly, he did not expect that 3 auctions had passed in the blink of an eye. These years had been spent in a busy manner, and it suddenly felt like only 2 or 3 years had passed, but looking back, it had been 15 years since he first came here. He still remembered when he was in Swallow City, he joined on Guangzhong because of a jade pendant. The past was still vivid in his mind, and counting with his fingers, it had been more than 20 years since he stepped into the cultivation world. In this way, he seemed to be in his early 40s, but in the cultivation world, 40 years old was still young. I wonder how that girl from the Wu clan is doing, Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself, standing on the treetop as the wind rose and fell, and shook his head with a bitter smile. In fact, because he had the golden bead, he could come here to see that girl every day, but he did not do so, and devoted all his energy to the great cause of scheming against others. Could it be that she was already married? After thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely. This era was different from his previous life, and Wu Lixue had already been branded with his, Yu Qianqiu's, mark. She could not be married at will. But because of this, he wanted to use the opportunity of the Wu clan's auction to make a high-profile appearance and announce that he had returned. Now, he was a little afraid of seeing that girl's sad eyes when he went to the Wu clan. We have to meet anyway. At worst, I'll just get beaten up by that girl, and it's okay if I die. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth, jumped off the treetop, and flew quickly to Hat Island. Being on the streets of Hat Island, Yu Qianqiu looked around, and there was not much change. Looking left and right, he walked in the bustling crowd, and no one paid attention to him. After all, not everyone had seen him with their own eyes. But, it was not that no one had not seen him, so, Suddenly, someone on the street let out a long cry of surprise. Damn it! I thought no one would recognize me after making a high-profile appearance. Yu Qianqiu criticized in his heart, and continued to walk his own path, and let others be surprised. The passers-by followed the surprised person's gaze, and immediately, someone couldn't help but exclaim again, "It's Yu Qianqiu." What? It's Yu Qianqiu. Where? Ah! It's really him, Yu Qianqiu is back. The entire streets of Hat Island were suddenly in an uproar, and the news quickly spread that Yu Qianqiu, who had become the #1 expert below the soul formation stage in a foreign country, had returned. The first reaction of the disciples of the various sects was to run back to the shops of their sects and pass this important news back to their own sections. Under the gaze of countless people, Yu Qianqiu felt like returning home in glory. When he walked to the river bridge that had been destroyed in the battle with Luo Qingtian and had been rebuilt, a large group of people from the Wu clan had already flown over. The person who was laughing was naturally the Wu clan's clan master, Wu Sihai. He had met most of the others before. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands at them and said with a smile, "Long time no see, how are you all?" The current Yu Qianqiu was no longer comparable to the Yu Qianqiu of the past. His reputation was not just ordinary. It was said that he had been personally acknowledged by a soul formation final stage expert as the #1 expert below the soul formation stage. In addition, some of the higher-ups of the Wu clan knew that he was Bai Changchun's disciple, so they were all polite to him and greeted him back. Good. Wu Sihai looked at him and couldn't help but clap his hands and praise him a few times. He was so happy that he couldn't speak. Then, he waved his hand and said, "Please." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd, but he didn't see Wu Lixue's figure. After feeling slightly disappointed, he didn't stand on ceremony and flew into the sky, following the Wu clan's group to the Wu clan's residence. After arriving at the Wu clan's ancestral hall, Yu Qianqiu respectfully bowed to the remade portrait of Bai Changchun in the center. The original portrait had already been burned by him. Then, the Wu clan's people all followed suit and bowed. Ever since Bai Changchun, the #1 figure in the cultivation world, was widely known by the people of China's cultivation world, the entire Wu clan became more and more respectful to this portrait. They even sent people to guard it so that the tragedy of being burned down last time wouldn't happen again. If that happened, they would be letting down the old ancestor. After a series of courteous greetings, Yu Qianqiu was a little impatient. He really didn't have a common language with this group of people. Just think about it, when he first met this group of tribulation-passing experts, he still felt a little excited. Now that they were asking and answering, he felt that it was boring. He could only force a smile and deal with them. It wasn't that he looked down on them, but he had seen too many big scenes. Right now, his eyesight and knowledge had far surpassed them. It felt like an adult talking to a 3-year-old child. However, he couldn't show his unwillingness because of Bai Changchun and Wu Lixue. Otherwise, with his temper, he would have left long ago. Wu Sihai understood this fellow who liked to cause trouble wherever he went. He dismissed everyone and asked someone to lead Yu Qianqiu to the quiet guest house to rest. Chapter 665. As soon as he arrived at quiet guest house, Yu Qianqiu dismissed the Wu family's disciples who asked him if he needed anything. He strolled around the garden alone and even peeked through the cracks in the rockery, but he did not find a place to hide someone. He could not help but look around and ponder. Didn't Wu Sihai hint that Wu Lixue would often be alone here? Where did she go? Could it be that she's deliberately avoiding me? It seems like that girl is angry that I haven't been here for a long time. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and ran back to his room, instantly disappearing. When he reappeared, he had already returned to a remote place in Utopia. He closed his eyes and contacted the item he had given Wu Lixue. From Wu Sihai's words, that girl was still thinking about him. In that case, the item he gave her should be with her. Not long after, he found the location of the item and appeared in the room again. After that, he went straight downstairs to the back room, only to find that his target location was actually a small storeroom in the corner. He frowned immediately, and without saying a word, he directly kicked the door in with a ping-ping sound. Immediately, an ear-piercing scream rang out from inside. With a murderous look on his face, Yu Qianqiu dashed in with a ball of black flames in each of his hands. When he saw the person squatting in the gray corner, he quickly scanned the surroundings warily, but he did not discover anything. He retracted the black flames in his hands, and the murderous look on his face disappeared. He stared at the person in the corner and said in shock, "Wu Lixue, what are you doing here?" He thought that Wu Lixue had been kidnapped or trapped in this small space, so he broke the door and barged in. Unexpectedly, it was not as he thought. He saw Wu Lixue hugging a ball of light that flickered and dimmed in the corner of the storeroom full of junk. Wu Lixue was looking at him with her eyes blinking. She was completely fine. Seeing that she did not say anything, Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "What did you scream about?" He did not know that he had suddenly kicked the door open and startled her. Wu Lixue shook his head and slowly moved over. He weakly bowed and said, "Mr. Yu." Then he quickly walked out. Yu Qianqiu was stunned by the way she addressed him as Mr. Yu. Then, he suddenly realized that this girl was really angry. So, he quickly dashed out and stood in front of Wu Lixue. He originally wanted to reprimand her, but he discovered that this girl looked haggard and didn't have the lively and adorable liveliness she used to have. He immediately became discouraged and lowered his head to admit his mistake. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have not come to see you for so long. Are you angry? I promise I won't do it again. Li Shui, please give me another chance. I'm afraid that you'll ignore me." He firmly believed that an innocent girl was easy to educate. She stared at him with her big, unblinking eyes and immediately became extremely wronged. Her eyes became misty and big drops of tears flowed down. Her shoulders trembled and she choked with sobs. With this cry, Yu Qianqiu felt even more guilty. He immediately pulled her into his arms and let her tears drench his chest. He carefully patted her back and comforted her. Don't cry, don't cry. In the end, the more he comforted her, the sadder she seemed to cry. She hid in his arms and sobbed, I thought you didn't want me anymore. Nonsense, how is that possible? Yu Qianqiu coaxed her like he was coaxing a child. The sisters in the family all say that you're now a great person in the cultivation world. You don't like a woman like me and won't want me anymore. Wu Lixue kept sobbing and complaining. It seemed like she had heard a lot of gossip. Damn it. Who's the one who's talking nonsense? Yu Qianqiu pushed her shoulders away with a murderous look and said fiercely, Who's the one who said that? Bring me to her and I'll kill them all. Let's go now. He turned around and walked away as if he was really going to kill someone. With this scare, Wu Lixue immediately stopped crying. She grabbed him with one hand and panicked, Don't. They're just saying it casually. Don't kill them. She grabbed him with one hand and held on to something in her other hand that was red and bright. She refused to let go. They're just saying it casually. Why are you crying like this? I don't believe it. Let's go and settle the score with them. Yu Qianqiu looked like he wouldn't stop until he killed a few people. He actually pushed the reason why she was crying to someone else and he did it so confidently. How could Wu Lixue withstand his bluff? She was really scared out of her wits. She grabbed onto him with all her might and shook her head with all her might. I won't cry anymore. It really isn't their fault. She knew Yu Qianqiu's style of doing things. Back then, he didn't even blink when he killed the Wu clan's elder. Why would he care about the lives of a few unrelated little girls? Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked, You really won't cry anymore? You were the one who said that the sisters in the clan were gossiping. You're still crying. It must be true. I'll kill them now. He acted like he was going to kill someone again. I won't cry anymore. I really won't cry anymore. Wu Lixue's face was covered in tears, but she tried her best to squeeze out a smile to tell him that she really wouldn't cry anymore. In the end, her smile was even uglier than her crying. Yu Qianqiu's heart softened. He couldn't bear to bluff her anymore. He bent over and carried her in his arms. He ran up the stairs and into the room. As soon as she was carried into the room, she thought of what he was going to do. She immediately said shyly, What are you going to do? Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly and said, What else do you think I'm going to do? I haven't seen you for a long time. Naturally, I want to make up for what I owe you. Wu Lixue's exclamation immediately sounded in the room. Then, Yu Qianqiu complained, Let go. Why do you keep holding this broken egg? Just throw it away. I can't throw it away. This is the first thing you gave me. Damn it. It's inconvenient for you to keep holding this. Don't snatch it. Grandaunt, can you let go first? It won't be too late to hug it after we're done. Then, there was a dong-dong sound in the room. It was the sound of something being thrown to the ground and rolling around. Hey! What is this? Wu Lixue's surprised voice came from the room. Hee hee. It's fun, right? This is the water art that I cultivate. I'll help you wash your flowery face first. Then, we'll take a bath together. The sound of water splashing could be heard. Then, the room was filled with Wu Lixue's cheerful laughter and Yu Qianqiu's sinister laughter. It seemed that the two of them were having a great time playing in the water. After a while, the window upstairs was opened. A small pool of water smashed into the garden with a bang and thoroughly watered the flowers and grass. Then, the window was closed tightly. There was a chaotic and unbearable sound coming from inside. It was really like a spring sleep without waking up. Until noon the next day, the sound of someone waking up lazily came from the room after a night of soul-stirring battle. No one knew what Wu Lixue was muttering. After a while, the sound of water splashing could be heard in the room again. It seemed that the two of them were playing in the water again. After a long time, the window opened and another pool of water smashed into the garden with a bang. After tossing and turning, the two of them always hid in the room to do things. It wouldn't be nice to say that, so the two of them decided to go out and take a stroll. Yu Qianqiu was lying on the bed half naked. He first drooled as he admired the beautiful scene of Wu Lixue's beautiful figure wearing clothes. One must know that Wu Lixue's impressive breasts were the biggest reason why he was attracted to her in the first place. Only after he was satisfied with the sight did he slowly wrap himself up. When they were about to leave, Yu Qianqiu saw Wu Lixue hugging the dinosaur egg that had rolled under the table. That thing had been adding color to the two's arduous battle the whole night. Yu Qianqiu had looked at it several times while they were fighting. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why are you always hugging it? Don't tell me you want to learn how to hatch eggs like a hen." Wu Lixue opened her eyes wide and pouted. "When you're not here, it's always with me. I've gotten used to hugging it over the years." Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly. He reached out his hand and said, "Then let me hug it too." Wu Lixue gave him the egg. He hugged it and looked at it carefully. Ever since he bought it for Wu Lixue, this was the first time he looked at it carefully. He walked to the window and looked at it under the sunlight. He couldn't see what was inside. He wanted to use his divine sense to check, but found that it couldn't penetrate. He couldn't help but scratch his head. Strange, why is this thing glowing? He turned around and asked, "Have you ever thought of opening it to see what's inside?" Wu Lixue shook her head. "I'll break it if I open it. This is the first thing you've given me. Why don't we open it now?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Wu Lixue shook her head resolutely. But Yu Qianqiu's curiosity was aroused. He even dared to barge into the underworld cave. How could he stop him? He said to Wu Lixue with a serious expression, "Have you ever thought that there might be some treasure inside? The treasure inside is the real thing I'm giving you." Wu Lixue was startled. Hearing him say that, her expression seemed to be a bit tempted. She asked suspiciously, "Is there really a treasure inside?" Yu Qianqiu nodded seriously. He patiently said, "From my experience in the cultivation world, there's a high chance that there's a treasure inside. How about we open it and see?" Wu Lixue was tempted by his words. She said, "If there's no treasure inside, then promise to give me something else as compensation." "No problem." Yu Qianqiu laughed. Since he had already convinced the owner of the dinosaur egg, he didn't hesitate to chop the egg. Puff! Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He slowly pulled his hand back from the egg. His hand was in pain, but the egg didn't react at all. "What's wrong?" Wu Lixue asked. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. His expression became serious. He began to pay attention to the dinosaur egg. With his current cultivation, even though he didn't use his full strength, his palm strike was enough to split open a large rock. Who would have thought that this thing would be so hard that it didn't react at all? He was now suspecting that this thing might actually be a treasure. In for a penny, in for a pound. Yu Qianqiu's temper flared up. He suddenly started punching and kicking the egg crazily. However, after a long time, the egg didn't react at all. It wasn't just Yu Qianqiu. Even Wu Lixue was shocked. She never thought of breaking this thing, so she didn't know it was so hard. In her mind, Yu Qianqiu was known as the #1 cultivator below the soul formation stage, so his cultivation level must be very high. Even a piece of black iron should have been deformed by his attacks, but this so-called egg didn't have any reaction at all. This was incredible. Chapter 666. It can't be helped, it's forcing me to be ruthless. Yu Qianqiu laughed and placed the glowing dinosaur egg on the table with a sinister expression. Wu Lixue saw his sinister smile and couldn't help but ask in a small voice, "What do you want to do?" "Of course I want to open it," Yu Qianqiu said as he pulled out a large black saber from his storage pouch. Wu Lixue was dumbstruck. She naturally knew of the reputation of this large black saber. It was a treasured saber that could cut through anything. "Be careful, don't break the treasure inside," Wu Lixue said worriedly. "It's fine, I know what I'm doing." As he spoke, Yu Qianqiu's saber had already landed on the egg. Dong! A crisp sound rang out. The saber collided with the egg, emitting a sound that wasn't made of gold, wood, iron, or stone. The two of them looked over at the same time. The egg was still sitting on the table without any damage, but there was a white mark on its surface. Yu Qianqiu reached out to touch the white mark. Who would have thought that it would be like a chalk drawing, easily erasing it without a trace? The two of them looked at each other speechlessly. Yu Qianqiu looked at the large black saber in his hand, then looked at the egg-like glowing red object in disbelief. He simply couldn't believe that the unparalleled sharpness of his large black saber couldn't cut through this thing. Up until now, he only knew that the dark iron could slightly restrain the large black saber, but it couldn't completely block its sharpness. As for other things, it couldn't block them at all. Who would have thought that they would meet a tough opponent today? Wu Lixue's eyes were also filled with disbelief. She had heard that even soul formation stage experts wanted to steal this treasured saber, so it was easy to imagine how powerful it was. She never thought that the object she was always hugging would be so hard. She blankly said, "I can't open it, what do we do?" "I don't believe it." Yu Qianqiu spat. His saber whistled through the air, whistling through the air. With a bang sound, the table fell apart. The two of them could only watch as the egg smashed a hole in the floor and fell downstairs. There wasn't much commotion above, but there was a loud bang below. Even those standing above could feel the tremor. The two of them looked at each other, speechless. In for a penny, in for a pound. Since the floor was already broken, Yu Qianqiu dragged his saber and drew a circle on the floor, directly creating another large hole. Wu Lixue didn't have any objections and the two of them jumped down. In the end, he found that the stone floor at the bottom had been smashed into a deep pit, and the things in the room were destroyed by the flying rocks and soil. Even after 2 layers of buffering, Yu Qianqiu was still able to create a large hole. One could imagine how much strength Yu Qianqiu used. In the middle of the crater, the dinosaur egg lay there quietly. Its red light flickered as if it was looking down on someone's actions. Wu Lixue jumped into the hole and dug up the egg. After the two of them examined it carefully, they found that the broken thing was still stable and undamaged, except for some dirt. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he sheathed his broadsword. He knew that if he couldn't even leave a mark on it, it would be futile to try to cut it again. He had to think of another way. At this moment, the sound of many people rushing down could be heard from the garden outside. It was obvious that they had been attracted by the commotion here. Yu Qianqiu took the egg from Wu Lixue's hands and gave her a look, signaling her to send them away. Then, he scurried back through the hole on his head and hugged the egg to study it in the room. After a while, Wu Lixue hurriedly came back. When she entered the room, she was shocked and exclaimed, "What are you doing?" The room was flashing with green light. She saw Yu Qianqiu holding the egg with one hand. There was a brilliant green flame burning in his palm, wrapping around the egg in his hand and burning it. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and chuckled, "Since I can't split it open, I'll use fire." If fire still doesn't work, I'll boil it in water. In any case, I'll try all kinds of methods and it might work. If it really doesn't work, I can only give up. Who knows what this thing is? In any case, it can't be an egg. There can't be such a hard egg in this world. Hee hee. Maybe it's some rare material for refining artifacts. One day, I'll show it to the world's #1 refining expert, old ancestor Nan Ming. Maybe he'll recognize what it is. Wu Lixue nodded and silently stood beside him to observe. In the end, after half a day, there was no reaction from the egg. The red light was still flashing, and even the color didn't change. Wu Lixue couldn't help but ask, is this going to work? Treasure, treasure, it really is a treasure. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue. Although he didn't know what it was, the big black knife couldn't split it open. Even the highest temperature of the condensed green fire couldn't burn it. Just based on these 2 points, this thing was definitely not ordinary. It wouldn't be too much to call it a treasure. Let's boil it again. Yu Qianqiu did as he said. He opened his other hand, and clear water flowed out of his palm like a spring. But at this moment, the two of them exclaimed in unison, and their gazes focused on the egg. They saw that the strange thing that was being burned by the green fire suddenly stopped flashing red. After the last flash of red light, the red light solidified on the surface and didn't disappear anymore. It wasn't like before, where it kept flickering red and dark. However, the red light seemed to be stronger and brighter than before. Furthermore, it was getting more and more dazzling, illuminating the whole room in a bright red. What happened to it? Wu Lixue raised his hand to cover his eyes. It seems like burning it with fire is working. Continue burning it, I want to see what will happen. Yu Qianqiu put away the water that came out of his other hand. He squinted his eyes and continued to roast it with the green fire with an excited expression. However, when the red light was so strong that one couldn't look at it directly, the dazzling light started to recede, giving off a feeling that it had reached its peak. In the end, the red light became weaker and weaker. Slowly, the red ball that was being burned by the green fire turned into a black ball. The dazzling red light could no longer be seen, as if all the energy had been released. Wu Lixue's eyes widened, and he asked again, what happened to it? You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Suddenly, his expression changed. He stared at the egg with his eyes wide open. He couldn't help but exclaim, and the green fire in his palm started to sway. Wu Lixue immediately asked, what happened? What happened? It. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at Wu Lixue blankly, and said in shock, it seems to be absorbing my green fire. Ah! Wu Lixue cried out in alarm. Then what do we do? Hurry up and throw it away. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and squinted. Let it absorb, damn it. I'd like to see just what kind of trick it's playing. He did his best to stabilize the output of the green fire. But this black ball of fire was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much it sucked, it would never be full. It consumed most of the green fire elemental energy stored in Yu Qianqiu's body, but it was still absorbing. The green fire elemental energy in his body probably wasn't enough. Yu Qianqiu was wondering if he should take this thing to Twilight Valley's lair of green fire to see just how long it could absorb and what it would become. Suddenly, the black fellow's absorption speed increased, and the green fire before him was visibly being devoured. Alarmed, Yu Qianqiu clenched his teeth and tried to pour out all the green fire in his body, but the black fellow seemed rather sensible. It knew that Yu Qianqiu didn't have much left and was embarrassed to ask for more, so it suddenly stopped absorbing. Damn! This fellow really knows how to play with people. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. After a while, there was still no reaction, so he used the green fire in his palm to roast it a few more times, but there really was no reaction. Had it been full? Yu Qianqiu suspiciously withdrew the green fire back into his body and stared motionlessly at the black fellow. Wu Lixue looked at the black egg and then back at him. Seeing the rich variety of expressions on his face, she didn't know what was going on that outsiders didn't know. She wanted to ask what was going on, but when she saw Chen Changxing's unwavering gaze, she was afraid of disturbing him. After a long while, the two of them glanced at each other in confusion, wondering just what they had been doing all this time. The black egg was completely motionless. Outside, night had fallen, and the sky was filled with stars. Another day had passed. What do we do? Yu Qianqiu no longer had any temper with the black egg and didn't want to continue tormenting it, so he began to consult Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue took the black egg back and looked it up and down. Except that it no longer glowed, there was no difference from before. She turned her head and asked, "Don't you want to boil it with water?" Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He estimated that there would be no reaction even if he boiled it with water, so he didn't want to waste time. He looked out of the window and said with a smile, "Now it's dark. Let's get down to business. We'll talk about it later." After saying that, he held Wu Lixue up, causing the latter to exclaim. The two of them went to bed happily. As soon as they turned over the big quilt, Yu Qianqiu's complaining voice came, "My dear lady, didn't you just put it aside? Why did you suddenly appear out of nowhere and bring it up again? Give it to me." A big foot stretched out from under the quilt and kicked Haydn out. Then it kicked Haydn directly to the bottom of the bed and made him roll around. There was a lot of movement on the bed. The passionate love disturbed the tranquility of the night. The sun was rising, and it just bloomed with golden light on the distant horizon. Yu Qianqiu was sleeping in the quilt, but he was woken up by someone. He opened his sleepy eyelids and saw Wu Lixue staring at him, so he closed his eyes without hesitation and waved his arms to push Wu Lixue, who was supporting her upper body, down to sleep with him. Unexpectedly, Wu Lixue hurriedly pushed him awake again. She pointed outside the bed and said in surprise, "Look, look." Yu Qianqiu didn't know what she wanted him to look at. Suddenly, he heard the sound of something rolling on the floor. He opened his eyes wide and looked back. He saw the black egg that was thrown to the ground yesterday was rolling on the ground alone. Chapter 667. What does that mean? Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. This thing that couldn't be cut open by the peerless sword and couldn't be burned by the green flame actually moved by itself. What the hell is going on? He was dumbfounded, but Wu Lixue, who was behind him, quickly put on his clothes and said excitedly, "Let me see what's wrong." Climbing over Yu Qianqiu, he didn't even have time to put on his shoes and socks. Barefooted, he got off the bed and ran over. That black egg rolled here and there. Seeing that it was about to roll into the hole that Yu Qianqiu dug on the floor, Wu Lixue bent down and picked it up. His big eyes were filled with curiosity as he stared at the egg without blinking. Holding it in his hands and shaking it, he put it to his ear to listen. Suddenly, he let out a cry and looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. "Yu Qianqiu, there's really something moving inside." Yu Qianqiu revealed an idiotic expression and asked foolishly, "What's moving?" "I don't know." Wu Lixue looked at the black egg in his hands and asked, "Don't you think it looks like an egg? Do I need you to remind me?" "Not only does it look like an egg, but it also looks like a dinosaur egg." Yu Qianqiu sat up on the bed and rubbed his chin as he imagined the scene of a Tyrannosaurus Rex hatching from the egg and him taking it for a ride everywhere. But after thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't right. A dinosaur egg shouldn't be so tough that he couldn't open it no matter how hard he tried, right? Without any hesitation, he put on his clothes and jumped off the bed. He reached out and said, "Let me see." Wu Lixue handed the egg to him. Who knew that when he held it in his hands, his expression changed? He saw that the egg that was still quietly in Wu Lishue's arms immediately started to shake the moment it was in his hands. The egg shook violently, and even Yu Qianqiu's arms started to shake. Wu Lishue was confused, but Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He didn't know what it meant either. Beep, beep, beep. The entire room was filled with the sound of hurried rioting. Yu Qianqiu's face was flushed red. He used all his strength to hold on to the egg, and the man and the egg began to compete with each other. The egg in his hand reminded him of the pile drivers from his previous life. It was the kind of rapid vibration. In the end, Yu Qianqiu's whole body shook along with the egg in his hand. He held his breath and said, "You're so strong. I can't hold it anymore." F***CKU. Hey Dan was directly thrown out by him. It hit the wall with a ping sound, and then hit the ground with a bang sound, rolling around. The strange thing was, as soon as the thing left Yu Qianqiu's hand, the do-do-do vibrating sound disappeared. The black egg rolled on the ground and stopped moving. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded again. He said in astonishment, F***CKU. It can't be so strange, right? Is there really something wrong with my character? Wu Lishue looked at the black egg, and then looked at Yu Qianqiu. She couldn't help but laugh. Why was it fine in her hand, but it was haunted when it was in his hand? She held back her laughter and tentatively walked to the black egg to hold it. Sure enough, it was fine. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. Wu Lishue only took a glance at it and immediately burst into laughter. She laughed so hard that she rocked back and forth with joy. D***MN girl, if you dare to laugh again, I will strip your clothes and spank you. Yu Qianqiu threatened with a hazy face. I won't laugh, I won't laugh. Wu Lishue smiled and shook her head again and again. Suddenly, her smile froze on her face. She slowly looked down at her hand and said, Yu Qianqiu, come and have a look. It seems that there are many cracks on it. Really? Yu Qianqiu's face was suspicious, but then it turned into curiosity. He said excitedly, Where? Where? Let me have a look. His two outstretched hands just touched the egg, and then he retracted them. He smiled embarrassedly, You hold it. This broken thing is not right with me. The two of them looked at each other's heads and carefully observed the surface of the black egg. If they didn't look carefully, they really couldn't find that there were crisscrossed and very regular tiny cracks on the surface of the black egg. The distance between the cracks was almost the same as the size of the square, as if this egg was put together by many pieces. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but reach out to touch the surface. He said with a tut-tut, It's really a crack. Is this thing really an egg? Is there something hatching in it? Suddenly, there was a beep sound again. Yu Qianqiu quickly retracted his hand that was touching it. As expected, it verified the rule that he couldn't touch it. Wu Lishue looked at his embarrassed appearance of retracting his hand, and began to hold back a smile on her face again. However, she seemed to be complacent a little too early this time. It was good that Yu Qianqiu retracted his hand, but the beep sound sounded again, and it was very violent and continuous, beep. Wu Lishue's cultivation was far worse than Yu Qianqiu's. The egg in her hand almost jumped out, and her hands were jumping, and then there was no more movement. Looking at Wu Lishue's surprised expression, Yu Qianqiu finally felt a little better. At first, he thought it was really because of his character that even this black egg didn't like him. Now it seemed that it had nothing to do with his character at all. It was just a coincidence before. Maybe there was really something hatching in this egg, and it wanted to break the shell from the inside. Beep. Paw. Wu Lishue's arms jumped violently because of the jumping black egg. She almost let go of her hands, but she forcibly pulled them back. However, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, because he saw a little silver light popping out of the eggshell. It was sometimes black, sometimes silver, and sometimes black. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his arm and caught the small piece that flipped in the air. He casually looked at it, and suddenly said with a smile, "This egg is finally broken." It's not easy. Because of the slightly curved small piece in his hand, the slightly concave side was shining with dazzling silver light, and the slightly protruding side was black and inconspicuous. Obviously, it was the eggshell of the black egg. Yu Qianqiu shook the eggshell in his hand and said, "Li Xue, look at what's inside the egg." Before he finished speaking, he found that without his reminder, Wu Lixue had already squinted one eye and curiously looked into the hole on the eggshell. As she looked, she muttered, "Yu Qianqiu, I can't see clearly. But it's really beautiful inside, as if there are many colorful stars shining. Let me take a closer look." Little did she know that at this time, Yu Qianqiu was staring at her with his mouth wide open. Just as Wu Lixue squinted her eyes to look inside the egg, he saw a colorful light shining from the hole on the eggshell shining on Wu Lixue's face. Then, like a dream, an incredible scene appeared. The colorful light shone confusedly, and the sparkling colorful stars twinkled delicately, intertwining to form a ray of colorful shining stars. Like a thin mist, it floated dreamily from the hole. Wu Lixue seemed to not notice it at all. She squinted one eye and continued to look. Her face was full of obsession, as if she was attracted by the gorgeous colors in the hole. As she breathed in and out, the thin mist that shone like the colorful stars was actually sucked in by her. She was still smacking her lips and sniffing with all her might. She said, "What is this? It smells so good. Yu Qianqiu, do you smell it?" She took a few deep breaths in an intoxicated manner. As the first wisp of colorful shining mist was sucked in by her, countless colorful light spots that floated in the air began to gather on her body. Slowly, it started from her head and gradually covered her whole body. Yu Qianqiu swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He didn't smell any fragrance, but he felt that the room was suddenly filled with an ancient and rich aura. It was very, very ancient. It made people have the urge to bow down and worship. What did he see at this time? The Wu Lixue in front of him was like a goddess who was shrouded in dreamy colors. She was barefooted, stepping on the colorful stars, and her whole body was shining with a holy light. More and more colorful star mist gently coiled around her body, and gradually condensed into a pair of almost illusory wings behind her. The ancient aura on the wings was especially dignified. It was the kind of ancient and incomparable noble aura, as if she was an eternal royal family. The colorful light in the room shone brilliantly, and the colorful wings that shone with the stars slowly spread open and gently flapped. Yu Qianqiu even had an illusion that Wu Lixue was about to spread her wings and fly away, flying to the eternal stars in the universe. Wu Lixue was still looking at the hole with a face full of excitement and curiosity. She didn't seem to know the changes that had happened to her body. Yu Qianqiu only felt that his mouth was dry. He wanted to call out to Wu Lixue, but he was a little speechless. He subconsciously felt that this was probably a good thing for Wu Lixue, and he should not disturb her. However, the scene in front of him was too dreamy. It was so beautiful that it was breathtaking. He had never seen anything like this before. After a long time, the dreamy colorful mist in the egg seemed to have dissipated. The large wings behind Wu Lixue also slowly retracted quietly, and then all the colorful light quietly attached to Wu Lixue's body and disappeared, as if it had drilled into Wu Lixue's body. The colorful color in the room also disappeared, and it returned to normal. Yu Qianqiu silently stared at the egg in Wu Lixue's hands. If he hadn't experienced the strange things that happened to this strange egg from the beginning to the end, he wouldn't have believed that what he saw just now was real. However, he saw it clearly from the beginning to the end. He was the driving force behind the whole thing. Damn it! This egg was definitely not simple. Yu Qianqiu looked at Wu Lixue, who was still holding the egg and looking at it from the hole with her eyes, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that the person involved didn't know what happened, and he was afraid that he was the only witness to this matter. This girl might have encountered some kind of fortuitous encounter. Yu Qianqiu wanted to tell Wu Lixue what happened, but just as he opened his mouth, he thought about it and held it back. He felt that it was better not to tell her for the time being. This girl was too naive, and if someone with ulterior motives got something out of her mouth, it would harm her instead. As her man, he had the responsibility and obligation to protect her from harm. Chapter 668. With this thought in mind, Yu Qianqiu decided not to mention what he had just seen, at least not to anyone in the short term. Otherwise, he did not know what would happen if word got out. He hoped that he could do his best to let her remain pure for the rest of her life and experience fewer troubles. Ah! Why are the colorful stars gone? Wu Lixue frowned and muttered. Then, she raised her head excitedly and shouted to Yu Qianqiu, "I saw something inside, guess what it is?" Yu Qianqiu silently looked at her, his eyes filled with love as he smiled and said, "I'm guessing it's something with wings." Wu Lixue was stunned and asked in surprise, "How do you know?" Then, she squinted her eyes and continued to look. "It has wings, but it is not moving, so I can't see what it is." Ah! It's moving, it's moving. Yu Qianqiu's interest was immediately piqued. He really wanted to see what was inside that caused such a miraculous scene. Just as he was about to reach out to hold the egg in Wu Lixue's hand, the entire egg suddenly became surrounded by a colorful halo, making a series of pa-pa-pa sounds and bursting with a dazzling light. When the two closed their eyes, they heard a series of sounds of things falling on the floor. When the dazzling light disappeared and the two opened their eyes again, the egg in Wu Lixue's hand had disappeared. Between the two of them was an ugly, strange bird. Looking at it, it was flying proudly and arrogantly. Just the way it turned its head and looked around, it seemed to be saying, "I finally broke out of the egg." Crow! The two of them exclaimed almost at the same time. Then, they looked at each other in shock, thinking that they had seen wrongly. Just think about it. After spending so much effort and so many strange things, a strange egg that took 2 days to hatch turned out to be a crow. Moreover, this crow was uglier than a crow. It was a crow that did not look alike. It basically had the outline of a crow and shiny black feathers, but there were 3 colorful feathers on its head. Its beak and claws were a dazzling gold, and the feathers on its head and neck glowed with a purplish-blue metallic luster. Its body seemed to be much wider than an ordinary crow's. 2 eyes brimming with intelligence blinked, but generally speaking, the closest bird was a crow. Wu Lixue was a little better. After all, she didn't see the shocking scene that happened to her. But Yu Qianqiu found it hard to accept that such a breathtaking and magnificent scene was actually a crow. How was this possible? The crow flapped its wings and looked around proudly, as if it could understand what the two of them were saying. When it heard the two of them exclaiming, "Crow," it seemed to have suffered a huge blow. It staggered and almost fell on the floor. Fortunately, it flapped its wings desperately and flew up. His head turned left and right, sizing up the two of them. His intelligent eyes were actually filled with grief and indignation, an indescribable desolation, as if he had been humiliated. The two of them were stunned by the crow's dramatic expression. Could it be that the crow could understand human speech? Yu Qianqiu looked at it carefully. It seemed to be quite different from a crow, but overall, it still looked like a crow. He then asked tentatively, "What bird, can you understand what we're saying?" The crow glared at him angrily and turned its head away arrogantly, as if it couldn't be bothered with him. "Oh ho!" Yu Qianqiu raised his 2 sleeves and threatened with a sinister expression, "Little bastard, you've got guts. You've just hatched and you dare to show off. If I let you flop around for another 2 days, you'll turn the sky upside down. Do you believe that I won't pluck your feathers right now and let you run naked on the ground?" The crow flapped its wings and immediately turned around to glare angrily at them. The purplish-blue metallic feathers on its neck opened up, as if it wanted to fight it out with Yu Qianqiu. "Feathered bastard, you're asking for a beating." Yu Qianqiu opened up his claws, wanting to grab it and beat it up. Wu Lixue, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but laugh. Seeing that he was really going to make a move, she immediately called out to stop him. "Yu Qianqiu, don't hurt it." Seeing that she was protecting it, Yu Qianqiu retracted his outstretched hand and grinned. "I was just trying to see if it could really understand us. From the looks of it, it really can." Hearing him say that, Wu Lixue's eyes lit up. From the crow's actions, it seemed like it could really understand human speech. Wu Lixue's eyes immediately lit up as she looked at the crow. Suddenly, her nose twitched and she said, "Yu Qianqiu, do you smell that? It smells so good. It's the fragrance I smelled just now." Ever since the crow came out, the room had been filled with a strange fragrance. It was just that his attention had been focused on the crow and he had not noticed it. Now that Wu Lixue mentioned it, Yu Qianqiu sniffed it. It was indeed very fragrant, like musk or orchids. He could not describe the fragrance, but it made him feel refreshed. The crow flapped its wings and looked around. Suddenly, it landed on Wu Lixue's shoulder and rubbed its head intimately on her hair. Wu Lixue was tickled by it and could not help but giggle. She raised her hand and stroked its smooth feathers. The crow's expression immediately became peaceful. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and looked at the bird. No matter how he looked at it, he did not feel comfortable. A beautiful lady with a crow perched on her shoulder, it was indeed a strange sight. His gaze was suddenly attracted by the shiny silver eggshells on the floor. He walked around the room and picked up all the eggshells that were scattered on the floor. Every time he picked up a piece, he would secretly circulate his energy to test it. In the end, he found that it was still extremely hard. With his level of cultivation, he could not do anything to these eggshells. After testing it, he was a little shocked. He thought that the eggshells had softened after hatching, but he did not expect them to still be so hard. Just think about it, he could not open them even after spending so much effort, but this stupid crow managed to open them. How strong was this stupid bird? Yu Qianqiu looked at the crow solemnly. It was said that one could not judge a person by their appearance, but he did not expect that birds could not be judged by their appearance either. It looked ugly, but it was actually quite capable. Yu Qianqiu started to ponder. What kind of bird was this? After thinking about it, he even searched through some of the myths and legends, but he could not think of any bird that looked like a crow. But one thing was for sure, it was definitely not an ordinary bird. It could be seen from the movements it made earlier. He had just kept the eggshells when he suddenly heard a concentrated pu-pu sound coming from the air outside. The two of them looked at each other and did not know what had happened. They walked to the window and opened it. They saw countless different kinds of birds circling in the sky, and there were more and more of them coming from afar. What's the meaning of this? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled. In a flash, he directly jumped out of the window and flew to the roof of the quiet guest house. Wu Lixue also rushed up. The two of them looked around and were instantly stunned. The Wu clan was originally located in the vast mountains, so there was naturally no lack of all kinds of birds in the surrounding forest. But now, the sky above the Wu clan was currently filled with thousands of different kinds of birds, filled with all kinds of chirping sounds. The spectacular colorful scene floated in the sky like flowing clouds. At this moment, not only the two of them, but the entire Wu clan had also come out. They all stared at the sky in astonishment, not knowing what had happened. The cultivators of the various sects on Hat Island were also looking at the Wu clan from afar, and all of them were amazed. Wu Sihai led a few Wu clan elders and flew to the Wu clan's defensive sentry tower. The disciples on the sentry tower did not know what to do. Their duty was to stop people who trespassed into the Wu clan, but there was no such thing as stopping birds that trespassed into the Wu clan. Seeing that the clan head had arrived, they immediately asked the clan head if they should drive them away. Wu Sihai looked around and looked into the distance. He saw that there was a continuous flow of all kinds of birds coming from the dense forest, forming a trend that covered the sky and the sun. It made one's scalp go numb. The elders looked at each other. They had seen all kinds of birds, but no one had seen so many birds gathered together. It was simply a great spectacle. Wu Sihai looked at the densest flock of birds in the sky. He did not know what attracted them there, and they were circling below the quiet guest house. Wu Sihai's gaze suddenly focused, and he saw Yu Qianqiu and Wu Lixue on the roof of the quiet guest house. The two of them were pointing at the birds above their heads. Wu Sihai's immediate judgment was that this matter was definitely caused by Yu Qianqiu. This was because this fellow would cause a commotion no matter where he went. Even if someone told Wu Sihai that this matter had nothing to do with Yu Qianqiu, Wu Sihai would not believe it. He did not believe that this fella had nothing to do with Yu Qianqiu during normal times. It would be strange if this matter had nothing to do with him. There's no need to drive them away. Nothing will happen. Wu Sihai instructed the disciples on the sentry tower, but you all have to be vigilant. Be careful of people trying to fish in troubled waters. Although the disciples on the sentry tower did not know why he was so sure that nothing would happen, they still obeyed the order and retreated. Women were naturally fond of small animals, and birds with colorful and beautiful feathers were more attractive to them. At this moment, Wu Lixue was jumping excitedly on the roof. Although she lived in the mountains and had seen many birds, there were many birds in the sky that she had never seen before. Their bright feathers were dazzling. Wow! Look, it's so beautiful. Wu Lixue pointed at a pheasant that had just flown over her head. It had colorful feathers and a long tail of colorful feathers. It was like a peacock spreading its tail in the sky. Yu Qianqiu stammered perfunctorily. He rubbed his chin and stared at the sky. No matter how he looked at it, he found it strange. What made him feel the most strange was that some birds were natural enemies. For example, there was a vicious eagle mixed in the flock of birds. However, at this moment, they were coexisting harmoniously in the sky. It really did not make sense. Wow! That one is so beautiful. Wu Lixue pointed at the sky and exclaimed. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and glanced at her. He inadvertently saw that the crow on her shoulder glanced at the bird she pointed at. It revealed a disdainful look, as if it was mocking. This was considered beautiful. Chapter 669. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but chuckle. Why did it feel like this crow was jealous? You think you're worthy of mocking others with your black feathers? Xiao Xiao was stunned again. Looking at the flock of birds in the sky, and then at the crow, she couldn't help but reveal a face full of suspicion. Could it be that it attracted all these birds? The more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. The scene of the crow's birth was too eye-catching. It probably wasn't impossible for it to attract tens of thousands of birds. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for a flock of birds to come and congratulate at the moment it appeared. Looking at the various birds chirping happily overhead, it seemed like they were here to celebrate. I say, crow, think of a way to make them disperse. It's too rude to block others from sunbathing. Yu Qianqiu said tentatively. In the end, when the crow heard this, it shook on Wu Lixue's shoulder and staggered, almost losing its balance. It glared angrily at Yu Qianqiu, seeming to be very disgusted by someone calling it a crow. Wu Lixue turned around and asked in surprise, You said it can disperse the flock of birds in the sky? Yu Qianqiu shrugged, indicating that he couldn't be sure. The crow seemed to be very unhappy with Wu Lishue's belittling of its abilities. Its originally disdainful eyes suddenly became bright and spirited. It stared at the flock of birds in the sky, its body faintly glowing with vibrant colors. Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. The crow was still the same crow, but he suddenly felt that its aura was different. Such a small fellow actually had a domineering aura. At this moment, the birds in the sky suddenly disrupted their circling formation and began to descend one after another. In the blink of an eye, all the birds in the sky disappeared. Only feathers of various colors slowly floated down. With quiet guest house as the center, there were all kinds of birds everywhere, densely covering every visible corner. Even the roof where the two of them were standing was filled with them. The two of them didn't dare to move recklessly, afraid that if they moved, they would trample a few to death. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu and Wu Lixue, even Wu Sihai and the others on the watchtower were dumbfounded after witnessing this magical scene. Wu Sihai was even more certain that this matter was done by Yu Qianqiu. However, he was also suspicious of how Yu Qianqiu did it. Could it be that he had learned some kind of beast-controlling technique? Docile pigeons, ferocious eagles, colorful pheasants, no matter how big or small they were, all kinds of birds bowed their heads towards where the two of them stood. Wu Lixue looked at the proud crow perched on his shoulder, his mouth agape in shock. She wasn't an idiot. She naturally understood that it wasn't her or Yu Qianqiu who made the bird submit, but the crow on her shoulder. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the colorful birds with their heads lowered. An idea flashed through his mind. He remembered an ancient legend from his previous life. Legend has it that there was a kind of divine bird that could make a flock of birds bow down to it. Because of this, a beautiful idiom came into being, which was called, 100 birds bow down to the phoenix. However, the phoenix in the 100 birds bow down to the phoenix was a divine bird, the phoenix. Could it be the legendary divine bird, the phoenix? Yu Qianqiu's mind was filled with doubts. If he only saw the scene of its birth and not the crow itself, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't doubt that it was a phoenix, because the scene was very eye-catching. But if someone said that this bird that looked like a crow was a phoenix, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Legend has it that the phoenix was the most beautiful and noble divine bird. Just like the qilin, both male and female were collectively referred to as the phoenix. The male was the phoenix and the female was the phoenix. Generally, regardless of gender, they were collectively referred to as the phoenix. Legend has it that the phoenix's feathers were thousands of times more beautiful than a peacock's feathers. Furthermore, it had the mystical power of immortality and rebirth from the ashes. Because of this, another beautiful idiom came into being, which was called Phoenix's Nirvana. In short, the phoenix was the supreme existence among all the mythical birds. It was immortal and had eternal life. These myths and legends, Yu Qianqiu was very familiar with them in his previous life. Therefore, he immediately denied the possibility that this black-feathered crow was a phoenix. He couldn't help but think of the Wu clan's auction. At that time, it was said that the glowing egg was the egg of a vermilion bird. Could this crow be the legendary vermilion bird? That's not possible. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and denied this guess. Although he wasn't familiar with the legend of the vermilion bird, he knew that it was a hybrid descendant of the phoenix. It was an existence that could almost be compared to the golden-winged roc among the mythical birds. How could it look like a crow? **T. But looking at this tattered crow's eye-catching appearance, it was definitely not an ordinary bird. He didn't know where it came from. At this moment, the crow on Wu Lishue's shoulder suddenly opened its beak and let out a cry. The cry was loud and clear, like a desolate rustling, piercing through the clouds. As a result, Yu Qianqiu, who was close to it, was in a miserable state. He was so shaken that his eyes rolled back, he almost fell down the stairs. In his daze, he felt a hand supporting him. He subconsciously felt that it was Wu Lixue who had lent him a hand. Yu Qianqiu, what happened to you? Amidst the anxious cries, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and gradually woke up. However, his ears were still buzzing. He squeezed out a smile with a pale face and shook his head at Wu Lixue, indicating that he was fine. Looking around, the flock of birds had already disappeared, leaving only colorful feathers on the ground. In the distance, there was a dense group of flying figures escaping into the forest. Then, he looked at the crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder. It was staring at him with a mocking gaze, as if it was a punishment for him calling it a crow. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. It was really hard to believe that this little guy would scare people the moment he opened his mouth. It was really amazing with a single brilliant feat. The power seemed to be almost on par with Bai Changchun's cold snort. Or maybe it was the result of him standing too close. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have imagined that the sound that almost knocked him unconscious was the result of this stupid crow's cry. Then, he saw Wu Lixue holding his arm with a worried expression, but it seemed like she was completely fine. Yu Qianqiu immediately glared at the crow angrily. This was definitely revenge. Otherwise, how could Wu Lixue, whose cultivation was lower than his, be completely fine while he was almost knocked unconscious? Yu Qianqiu and the crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder looked at each other. The former's eyes were filled with anger, while the latter's eyes were filled with ridicule. Little did they know that Wu Sihai and the others in the sentry tower in the distance were staring at them in shock. The crow's cry had driven away all the birds, immediately attracting their attention. Based on their experience, they could immediately tell that the crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder was not an ordinary crow. At the very least, it was not an ordinary crow. It might even be a legendary spirit beast. That was an existence comparable to a soul formation cultivator. Could it be a spirit beast that Yu Qianqiu gave to Shuai? Wu Sihai was overjoyed and immediately confirmed his guess. This was because he naturally knew whether Wu Lixue had a spirit beast or not. The only possibility was that Yu Qianqiu had given it to her. Otherwise, how could he be so generous as to give a spirit beast to someone else so casually? Thinking of this, Wu Sihai's heart was filled with relief. It seemed like it was not in vain that he had tried to matchmake Shuai with him. This brat still had a bit of a conscience. You've all seen what happened with your own eyes. The news that should be kept under wraps must be kept under wraps. The reason for announcing it to the public must also be comprehensive. Don't make a fuss that can't be justified. Wu Sihai turned around and said to an elder beside him. The joy on the elder's face had yet to fade. What a joke. With a spirit beast in the family, it was equivalent to having a soul formation cultivator. He immediately cupped his hands and said, Rest assured, Patriarch. I'll make the arrangements immediately. With that said, he quickly flew away. Yu Qianqiu's furious gaze shifted away from the crow. He thought to himself, just you wait, there's a chance to settle this score. With a flash, he rushed back to his room. Wu Lixue stroked the crow on his shoulder and stuck out his tongue, as if saying, You've caused trouble. Then, he also rushed back to his room. As soon as he returned to his room, he saw Yu Qianqiu lying on the bed with his legs crossed. It seemed like he was still angry. Wu Lixue secretly smiled, knowing that he was in a bad mood after suffering a setback. He didn't disturb him and continued to play with the precious crow on his shoulder. Ah! Wu Lixue suddenly cried out in pain. Yu Qianqiu suddenly looked over. It would have been fine if he didn't look, but as soon as he did, he became furious. As it turned out, when Wu Lixue had been playing with the crow on his shoulder, the crow had suddenly pecked at Wu Lixue's finger, causing the skin on Wu Lixue's finger to break, and the crow had been licking the blood from its beak, seemingly savoring the taste of the blood. I'll kill you! Yu Qianqiu roared angrily, and in a flash, He stretched out his claws, wanting to grab the crow on Wu Lishue's shoulder and crush it to death. Don't. Wu Lishue was not having it. Instead, he used his hands to block the crow on his shoulder. Lishue, let me kill it. This stupid bird doesn't look like a good thing. It's bloodthirsty the moment it's born, it's very strange. It's not safe for you to keep it by your side. Yu Qianqiu was furious, as if he wanted to take revenge on Wu Lishue. No. It didn't do it on purpose. Wu Lishue pleaded. Yu Qianqiu, can you let it go? It's just a little skin on my finger, it's really not a big deal. Lishue, don't be stubborn. Let me kill. Yu Qianqiu couldn't finish his sentence. The crow on Wu Lishue's shoulder had closed its eyes that were filled with intelligence, and the 3 colorful feathers on its head were actually emitting a faint rainbow glow. What was it doing? Wu Lishue also noticed this strange phenomenon, and both of them were stunned. There were too many miraculous things about this crow, and it was beyond their imagination. Yu Qianqiu's anger disappeared just like that. His finger slowly scratched his chin, and he thought to himself, could it be that this stupid bird is evolving? Not long after, the crow's eyes suddenly opened, and it stared at Yu Qianqiu with a piercing gaze. With a clear and melodious voice, it shouted. What did you call me? How dare you call this god a stupid bird? The two of them almost fainted when they heard it. Yu Qianqiu's face was filled with disbelief. He pointed at it and stammered. You were the one who spoke just now. The crow shook its head in anger. That's nothing. This god was born to understand any language. Anything that can speak in this world, as long as it offers a drop of blood for this god to extract, this god will be able to learn their language in no time. But don't misunderstand, this god is incomparably noble. I won't extract just anyone's blood. For example, your blood is not worthy for this god to extract. The person it was looking down on was naturally Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 670. However, Yu Qianqiu did not seem to mind its words of disdain, instead staring at it suspiciously, sizing it up. The crow snorted coquettishly, what's wrong? Dumbfounded. You've never seen a bird that can talk like this god, right? Wu Lishue was dumbfounded, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping across the crow's chest and between its legs. Suddenly, he asked weakly, from your voice, it sounds like a woman's voice, are you a female? Shameless fellow. The crow's voice was filled with humiliation, its wings covering its chest, looking like a woman who had discovered that she was being peeped on by a man. Ha! Yu Qianqiu laughed evilly, waving his hands. Don't worry, even if you're a female, I'm not interested in birds. A whole body of black fur, there's nothing much to look at. The crow immediately buried its head into Wu Lishue's ear, saying, Shue, you have to control your man. It called me Shue. Wu Lishue felt like she was dreaming, looking at the wound on her finger, she was speechless. Ha! You really act like a woman. Yu Qianqiu circled around Wu Lishue twice, but he was actually looking at the bashful bird. He clicked his tongue and said, if I hadn't seen the scene of your birth, I would have thought that Brother Ba was mimicking you. But there's nothing strange about that, what has this great master not seen before, let alone a talking crow like you, this great master has even seen a talking dragon. The crow's head suddenly lifted up, looking at Yu Qianqiu curiously, you've seen a dragon? Is there a dragon here? That can't be. Dragons are supreme beasts, how could they appear in the mortal world so easily? This great master can say anything, but I don't know how to lie, do you think I'll lie to a crow like you? Yu Qianqiu waved his hands disdainfully, asking, tell me the truth, what kind of bird are you? You don't seem like an ordinary crow. Could it be the legendary vermilion bird? I'm warning you, you're not allowed to call this god a crow in the future. This god is incomparably noble, how can a crow compare to it? As for the vermilion bird, although it's a close relative of mine, it hasn't reached the level of a divine beast. At most, it's a top-notch immortal beast. After the crow waved its single wing in warning, it puffed up its chest and said proudly, "Dragons are the supreme divine beasts among the beasts, and I am the supreme divine beast among the birds. My bloodline is incomparably noble. I don't drink unless it's morning dew, I don't eat unless it's tender bamboo, and I don't perch unless it's 1,000-year-old parasol tree. I am the phoenix." Phoenix. You said you're a phoenix. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the crow with his mouth agape, and after a moment of daze, he suddenly laughed out loud, rocking back and forth as he said, "A black and swarthy crow like you dares to call yourself a phoenix, aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? You are not allowed to call this god a crow." The crow said angrily, "What right do you have to say that this god is not a phoenix?" Yu Qianqiu laughed so hard that tears almost flowed out of his eyes, waving his hands and saying, "I'm laughing so hard my stomach hurts. Forget it, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. If you say you're a phoenix, then you're a phoenix. You dare to look down on me." The crow was really angry now. Wu Lixue listened to the conversation between the man and the bird, and the more she listened, the more confused she became, asking, "What are you two talking about? What is a phoenix?" Standing on her shoulder, the crow stumbled again, staring at her with an aggrieved look and said, "Shwa, have you never heard of us phoenixes?" Wu Lixue thought for a moment, her face full of confusion as she said, "I only remember that the legends say that the vermilion bird is the supreme divine bird, but I've never heard of a bird called a phoenix." Yu Qianqiu was slightly taken aback, hearing Wu Lixue's words. He really had not heard of the legends of phoenixes in this world, and the only reason he knew about them was because he had the memories of his past life. The crow lowered its head weakly, muttering to itself, "Could it be that no phoenix has ever descended in this world? That's impossible. My mother should have descended in this world before. Didn't she leave behind any legends?" All of a sudden, it raised its head and stared at Yu Qianqiu, asking, "Then how do you know about phoenixes?" Wu Lixue also looked at him curiously. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback, he couldn't possibly say that he had lived two lives right. Immediately finding an excuse, he giggled and said, "Maybe your mother looks just like you, and everyone else thinks of her as a crow, who would care what a crow's name is? I've heard of a legend of a crow drinking water, but I don't think it's your mother." "Nonsense, my mother is the most beautiful mythological beast, with 7 colored feathers, and a rainbow glow around her body, noble and peaceful. Anyone can tell that she is extraordinary with one look, and as long as someone has seen her before, with just one look, no one can forget her. She's much prettier than I am." The crow's first few words were said arrogantly, but by the time it finished, it was as if it was feeling inferior because of its ugly appearance. Yu Qianqiu was stunned on the spot. According to the crow's description of her mother, she really looked like the phoenixes he had heard of in his previous life. But thinking about it, he snorted coldly, "Who are you trying to fool? When your mother gave birth to you, you were in the egg, how could you have seen your mother?" Wu Lixue nodded in agreement with Yu Qianqiu's words, saying to the crow, "Don't lie. There's nothing wrong with being a crow. I won't look down on you." The crow immediately fell onto Wu Lixue's neck, weakly getting up and explaining, "Our phoenix race, the reason why our bloodline is so noble is because we are born with the bloodline of our parents, and we are immortal, that's why we are noble. The reason why I am like this now is because I am still a young phoenix, although I only remember a small part of the memories my parents left me, but every time I go through a tribulation, I will be able to unlock another part of my memories, and my strength will increase greatly, and my appearance will become more beautiful. After going through 9 tribulations and being reborn 9 times, I will be able to unlock all my memories, and with my strength and memories, I will be able to find my way back to the divine realm." "Is that so?" Wu Lishue's voice was filled with doubt, obviously finding it hard to accept such a miraculous explanation. Just as the crow was speechless, Yu Qianchou suddenly exclaimed, "Phoenix's nirvana." Yeah. The crow cried out in surprise, flying onto Yu Qianchou's shoulder, hugging his face and kissing him, jumping up and down excitedly. You know about the phoenix's nirvana, you know about the phoenix's nirvana, then you definitely know what I mean. All of a sudden, it cried out in surprise again, flying into the air and slapping its claws against each other, as if it had stepped on dog poop. Am I that dirty? After eating my tofu, you still think I'm dirty? Damn. Yu Qianchou's face immediately darkened. Wu Lishue giggled as she covered her mouth, and the crow landed back on her shoulder, saying apologetically to Yu Qianchou, "My phoenix clan is noble and unsullied. We do not drink unless it is morning dew, we do not eat unless it is tender bamboo, and we do not perch unless it is 1,000-year parasol tree. I was too excited just now, that's why I perched on your shoulder, please don't misunderstand, I didn't mean anything else." Yu Qianchou's face darkened, pointing at Wu Lishue and saying, "Didn't you say that you do not perch unless it is 1,000-year parasol tree? Then why are you always on Shue'er's shoulder?" The crow shook its head and said, "I don't know the reason, but I feel that Shue'er is more noble than 1,000-year parasol tree, it's an instinctive choice, it shouldn't be wrong." Yu Qianchou started, suddenly recalling the scene of Wu Lishue growing a pair of fantasy star wings on her back. He could roughly guess the reason, but it wasn't convenient for him to tell Wu Lishue now. Changing the topic, he said, "According to what you said, since your mother came here before, why are there no legends of the phoenix here? Could it be that no one has ever seen her? Also, why did your mother give birth to you here? Couldn't she have just given birth to you in that divine realm? Why did she have to let you go through 9 tribulations to find your way home? Isn't your mother too cruel?" Wu Lishue nodded repeatedly, also feeling that the crow's mother was too cruel. Who knew that the crow would ask in return? Who said that there are no legends of the phoenix here? Don't you know? Yu Qianchou was speechless, this question was really hard to answer. The crow continued, "Our phoenix race is immortal, if we could give birth to descendants at will, wouldn't we be able to see phoenixes everywhere? The birth of us phoenixes must follow the great Tao, not just any phoenix can give birth to a descendant at will. I vaguely remember that the reason my mother came here was to follow the great Tao's will, to bring something here. As for me being born here, it is also because of the great Tao's will. And my birth means that this human world is about to." At this point, the crow immediately stopped talking. Yu Qianchou asked suspiciously, "What is about to happen in this human world? Great change or great chaos?" The crow choked for a moment, then shook its head and said, "I can't say that, revealing the heavenly secrets will result in a terrible fate." Bullshit heavenly secrets. Yu Qianchou rolled his eyes. In truth, he didn't believe in such things at all, he only believed in his own hard work. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes lit up as he asked, "Do you remember what treasure your mother brought with her?" The crow shook its head and said, "I don't know, I just have this impression." Yu Qianchou was very interested in that divine realm treasure, but who knew that this crow didn't know about it? He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Looking at the crow with waning interest, he shook his head and said, "Phoenix. I didn't think that a young phoenix would look like a crow." After some understanding, he basically believed that this crow was a phoenix. "If you call me crow again, I won't give Shue'er face, I'll teach you a lesson," the crow said angrily. Yu Qianchou snorted coldly and said, "Teach me a lesson. With just you. Even if you're a phoenix, you're just a little phoenix that hasn't grown up yet, and looks like a crow. You actually dared to shout at me. If I knew you were so heartless, I would have let you stay in the egg, I wouldn't have bothered to hatch you." This time, the crow didn't get angry, instead asking curiously, "You hatched me? How did you hatch me out of this world? For us phoenixes to break out of our eggs, we have to go through 9 days and 9 nights of intense fire, and even if the fire is small, it won't do. This can be considered as our first tribulation. Did you use fire to burn me for 9 days and 9 nights? How did you know this secret? You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.